Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our Mayor, councillors, council staff and all the members of the public joining us both online and here in person tonight. Please note that our meeting is being live streamed via Facebook, YouTube and Banyule City Council website. We kindly ask that all your mobile phones be switched off or placed on silent to avoid any interruptions during the meeting. We'll be going live shortly. Thank you.
Hello everyone, welcome to the 25th of May 2026 Council meeting. I open the meeting at 7 p.m. Our meeting is being held on the traditional land of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people, and on behalf of Banyule City Council I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional custodians. I'd also like to pay my respects to the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung elders, past, present and emerging, and to acknowledge other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders joining us today. Our Banyule community is made up of diverse cultures, beliefs, abilities, bodies, sexualities, ages and genders. We are committed to access, equity, participation and rights for everyone, principles which empower, foster harmony and increase the well-being of an inclusive community. I will now pass on to the Chief Executive Officer, Ms Alison Beckwith, who will read out the formalities.
Thank you, Mayor, and welcome all to this ordinary meeting of Council. As the Mayor indicated, my name is Alison Beckwith and I'm the Chief Executive Officer here at Banyule Council. Tonight's meeting is being held in person in accordance with the provision of Council's governance rules and the Local Government Act 2020. The meeting is also being live streamed so that those can join us from home via Council's website and Facebook pages. The live stream will be available on Council's website and YouTube page following tonight's meeting. For those of you at home, the live stream is not interactive. Any comments or private messages directed to us whilst the live stream is active will not be presented to the Council or have any bearing on the conduct of tonight's meeting. Council's request to speak methods also continue to allow participation of our residents without having to attend meetings in person. I'll now take you through some rules of our public participation for tonight's meeting. Public question time will occur at the end of the meeting. If a member of our community who submitted a question is present at that time, they are welcome to read their question out as submitted or indeed have that question read out on their behalf by a member of the staff. If the submitter is not present at that time, the question will not be read out. However, all public questions and their answers are included in the meeting minutes. I remind you all that no statement may be derogatory, defamatory, objectionable in language or directed to an individual councillor, member of staff, ratepayer or member of the public. A 2-minute time limit does apply to anyone that has requested to speak on an item. The timer will be used and a warning will be sounded at the 1.5 minute mark. If indeed a request to speak is being read out by a staff member, they will also sum up for the last 30 seconds. We ask that all present in tonight's meeting please ensure your mobile phones are either switched off or in a silent mode to avoid disruptions. And I also wish to remind all present that Council has a zero tolerance for any form of bullying, harassment or violence. All present at tonight's meeting, that being our community members, council staff and councillors, are expected to respect individual views of all persons, irrespective of their own view held, and allow respectful participation in tonight's meeting. Members of the gallery, if leaving tonight before the meeting does close, we ask you kindly not to hold conversations to your outside. This beautiful building, as beautiful it is, the noise does reverberate back into those listening at home, so we thank you in advance for that. I'll now introduce you to the councillors in attendance tonight, and I'll start to my left We have Councillor Peter Castaldo from Griffin Ward, Councillor Matt Wood from Hordern Ward, Councillor Alicia Curry representing Ibbott Ward, and Councillor Mary O'Kane representing Olympia Ward. And to my right, we have the Mayor, Councillor Alison Champion representing Sherborne Ward, the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Rick Garotti representing Grimshaw Ward, Councillor Alida McKern from Charlesworth, Councillor Elizabeth Neely from Beale Ward, and Councillor Mark De Pasquale representing Bakewell. This evening, the councillors are also joined by the executive team here at Council. So over to my left, I have Joseph Tobacco, Director of Community Wellbeing, and Natasha Swan, Director of City Development. And over to the right, Darren Bennett, Director of Assets and City Services, and Mark Gilio, Director of Corporate Services. The council team is also supported by members of our Governance and Integrity team and IT teams. So we thank you very much for participating in tonight's meeting. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks very much, Alison. So we have no apologies for this evening. Confirmation of minutes for the ordinary meeting of Council held on May the 4th, 2026. Could I please have a councillor move that item? Minutes. Councillor Alicia, and I'm happy to second the item. All those in favour? And that is carried. Disclosure of interests for councillors. As required at any meeting of council, councillors must declare a conflict of interest at the start of the meeting and leave the meeting when the item is presented to council. Councillors will be required to leave the meeting and return when the item has been resolved. At any point throughout the meeting, if any other councillor recognises they have a general or a material conflict of interest, they can flag it at that point and we can follow the same procedure. Do we have any disclosures of interest by councillors this evening? Councillor Alicia Curry. I think you're declaring a conflict of interest with regard to item 8.4, proposed budget 2026 to 2030 for public exhibition, regarding the Heidelberg Theatre Company budget submission. And you'll need to declare the general conflict at the time of the meeting and leave the chamber before voting on that item. Okay. Also, Councillor Curry is declaring a general conflict of interest in regard to item 11.1, Heidelberg Activity Centre, gazettal of amendments to C172 and GC270 to the Banyule Planning Scheme. So, Councillor Alicia, would you mind advising us of the items you've got a conflict of interest in and the nature of that interest?
Thanks, Mayor. So I'm declaring a conflict of interest for 8.1 proposed budget, as I have close relationships with the committee members at the Heidelberg Theatre, and it may be perceived as a conflict by our public. I'm also declaring a conflict of interest for the Heidelberg Activity Centre 11.1. This is in relation to part of that item, which is the C172 gazetted documents, because I made a submission to the panel hearing for the C172 as a private resident, and again this might be perceived as a conflict, and both items are general items of conflict rather than material. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor. So later on this evening, as the items arise, we will note that Councillor Alicia has declared a conflict of interest and suggests that she leave the chamber. Any staff, officers who are present, I ask whether you have a conflict of interest in any items presented before Council tonight. That is a no. So we're going on to urgent business. I note there is no urgent business this evening. Item 7.1. Petition Banyule City Council to review its commitment to safety and security in the community. There are 3 speakers on this item. So we have John Grasso, our lead petitioner, is speaking in person for the item. Please make your way to the lectern, John. Thank you for joining us this evening. Okay, you're welcome. And you have 2 minutes.
That's better. Okay. Feeling safe in the community and especially in our homes is paramount as a baseline principle for achieving best possible overall health and wellbeing outcomes for all members of our community. I provide the following context for my address. The following initiatives are currently initiatives that the Council are involved in. The First Nations Advisory Committee, the Banyule Environment and Climate Action Advisory Committee, Connected Communities Advisory Committee, Arts and Culture Advisory Committee. All of the above items share, amongst other things, two pertinent points. Firstly, they are important to all members of our community, and secondly, they are most relevant to this discussion. They have nothing to do with rates, roads or rubbish. Our initiative, as spelled out in the submission, has three key actions. I want to focus on Action 2, our medium-term objective. Safety and Security Committee with representation from residents, members of council, officers, police and industry stakeholders. The Council, between the years of 2017 and 2021, strongly agreed with this position. I refer the Council and officers to the following Council plan issued from 2017 and 2021, where Council clearly states they are well placed to lead crime prevention in the municipality. In Council's own words within this document, they state they are well placed to lead and participate in crime prevention activities, and due to their functions and relationships to the community and other key partners, it is reasonable for residents to expect that local governments fulfil these roles. The officers' report on our petition contends that their involvement is now integrated across other plans. I'm yet to find anything in the publicly available documents issued after 2021 that supports these contentions. The committee we propose would be specialist in nature and would aim to provide strategic guidance and stakeholder perspectives that promote safety and crime prevention in the municipality. I refer you to Whitehorse Council's model for the basic structure of a committee we feel could be most effective to achieve our goals. We also propose that one of the first functions where this committee would be effective would be to provide, from a crime prevention perspective, to the council officers to help steer their upcoming review of the Banyule surveillance in public places policy in a direction that better serves the community's need for deployment of the current and future council surveillance assets in a way that prioritises crime prevention and deterrence over post-event investigation and enforcement. So thank you for your consideration.
That's lovely. Thank you so much, John. And our next speaker is in person, David Mulholland from Banyule Ratepayers Action Group. Thanks for being here tonight. David, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to the 156 Banyule residents who have taken the time to raise these concerns. BRAG supports your petition. The reality is that many residents no longer feel as safe as they once did. Recent data shows Banyule recorded approximately 11,495 criminal offences in 2025, an increase of more than 13% in just 12 months. Property crime remains the biggest issue, with more than 6,200 property and deception offences recorded across Banyule. Theft offences alone reached almost 4,000. Across Victoria, crime has surged to record levels, with motor vehicle thefts at their highest level in more than 2 decades, and youth offenders heavily overrepresented in aggravated burglaries, robberies, home invasions and more recently fire bombings. Residents see these headlines, they hear about home invasions, they see stolen cars in their streets, and they are demanding action. However, council is not the policeman. That responsibility sits squarely with the state government. And right now, your community is clearly saying they want more visible police, stronger policing resources, faster response times, and greater police presence in our suburbs and shopping precincts. This petition should therefore send a very strong message not only to council but directly to the state government. Banyule needs additional policing resources. Our community deserves to feel safe in their homes, safe at train stations, safe in shopping strips and safe walking our streets at night. This issue should become a major advocacy item for this council leading up to the November state election. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. Our third... Yes?
Just a question for either of the speakers. Given our good state member is the police minister, have you approached our local member
Yeah, our group's received no response to multiple emails to Mr. Cartwright.
Okay.
They have failed to recognise that there's a problem. That's why we're here, trying to get council to advocate, and maybe they can make them see.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Our third speaker is speaking against the item, Logan Farrell. Welcome, Logan. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, Council. I'm not opposed to the receiving of this petition, of course, as I am with every petition. I think every petition should be heard and received. And I'll start with the good of the petition, which is that it recognises that we should be focusing on family violence, as we've seen being very prevalent all across the nation. We're experiencing currently a major femicide crisis. But apart from that, if I'm being honest, this petition comes across as an attempt to shift blame and responsibility onto council for a perceived rise in crime when crime has barely risen over the past decade, with the main types being theft of a motor vehicle and breach of parole conditions, which less mark a desire for violence and more marks a system that isn't working for people. Some councils have responded to calls like this by hiring private security, which has made particular communities, such as rough sleepers, feel intimidated and unsafe, as well as needlessly waste valuable council resources that could be spent uplifting and empowering. So I urge council to be careful in considering this petition.
Thanks very much, Logan. Okay, we have a motion in front of us. Does
Through
any
you,
councillor
Mayor,
have... Yes?
I have a question.
Go for it.
Just given what the speakers have presented, I'm interested if the appropriate officer could comment on community safety and what council does do, what initiatives we do have in place in relation to community safety. And I'd also, if we can, receive some comments around the council plan from 2017 to 2021. If indeed crime prevention was one of the objectives there, how has that played out in the new council plan?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I'll start with the first question. So just in relation to council's role in community safety, it's one which is reasonably constrained. I think some of the speakers tonight made very clear that the role of community safety from a policing perspective sits with Victorian Government through Victoria Police. Council has a very collaborative and productive relationship with our local Victoria Police partners. We do meet on a periodical basis through the Local Safety Area Committee. That is where information from the community and a number of stakeholders and other agencies who meet on a regular basis to problem solve and identify opportunities for collaboration and improvement. We have a community safety officer who's focused primarily on preventative measures, so working with a number of key stakeholders, a number of our retail trader associations as one example, where a lot of policing-related issues often are reported. We also work in partnership with Victoria Police through the delivery of a Coffee with a Cop session, which we've found increasingly successful in a number of our activity centres. We also deliver an annual forum which allows the community to actually hear from senior figures within Victoria Police who are open to understanding what local concerns are. That's regularly scheduled around about September, October of each year. We'd encourage members of the public here to consider their participation in that. Has been operating for a number of years and has been proven to be successful in delivering some good outcomes. In relation to the council plan, I'm not sure I can actually comment on that because council's plan is the current adopted council plan and the council's resources are relative to what is currently adopted by council. So I won't make a comment in relation to the previous council plan. That was a previous term of council as well.
Councillor Neely?
Just a quick question, just following up. In terms of resources, what limitations does council have in this space to the appropriate officer, please?
Through you, Mayor, resourcing is quite constrained. So as I foreshadowed, we do have a part-time community officer who is working across a number of key agencies and working with Victoria Police directly. So there are resourcing constraints. From an enforcement perspective, we do not have a role to play in that particular space. So the current resourcing responds to Council's role under the Local Government Act and enables Council to be involved in proactive preventative measures.
Any other questions? Councillor Mark.
Mayor, if I may, just a question to the appropriate officer, and maybe take it on notice. I don't understand or whether the answer would be available. Neighbourhood Watch, what has happened to Neighbourhood Watch organisations in our municipality? Are they still running? And if so, are council involved?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Thank you for the question, Councillor Di Pasquale. Very good point. Yes, we do have active neighbourhood watch groups active in Banyule. In fact, they are participants in the regular local safety area committee meetings that are facilitated by Victoria Police. They actively play a role in our community events. So the Malahang Festival is one example where we often have a neighbourhood watch stall. Like any volunteer-based organisation, they're always looking for people to contribute. And it would seem through this particular petition there's probably a number of people who might be best placed to contribute or put their hand up to volunteer to be a part of the Neighbourhood Watch group. We have those details on our website as well.
Do you have any other questions of any other councillor? Okay. All right, we have a report before us set out in the agenda. If I could have that brought up onto the motion. Do I have a mover for the motion? Councillor Mary O'Kane. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Rick Garotti. Councillor Mary, would you like to speak to the item as the mover?
Sorry, no, thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Rick, as the seconder, would you like to speak?
With due respect, Mayor, there was actually an alternative. Was that not going to be presented? My assumption was that it would go up this evening. And that is that
I think,
a report
Mayor, that
come
the
back to the council.
councillor could flag that there
You're foreshadowing?
Foreshadowing an amendment if this isn't adopted.
Adopted, yep. So that's my understanding. So we've got a mover and a seconder, and you're foreshadowing that there's an amendment if it doesn't get up. Okay. So, Councillor Rick, as the seconder, would you like to speak to the item?
I'd just like to thank the petitioner and those who spoke on the item. Really appreciate your comments and feedback. It is a serious issue, a challenge, but I think that I was grateful to hear the question asked by Councillor McKern and the response provided, and I look forward to further advice coming back to Council through the Wellbeing Officer. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Did any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Peter?
I'll just keep it short, but I'm very supportive. Thank you for putting the petition forward. It's important that all councillors are aware of all of the things that are going on in the background, and this will bring it to our attention, and for the officers that will write back and inform us all of the current situation.
Any other councillor? Councillor Mark?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, well, safety and safety of our residents is always in our conversations. It was actually one of the bases and one of the promises that I made to my community when I was re-elected, with regards to evaluating CCTV, how the police function through the Greensborough area, because there's been a fair bit of crime in the Greensborough area recently and also in the past. So I would like that addressed on behalf of my residents also. I do question process though. I did hear the speaker this evening mention a committee, and I do want to understand a little bit more of the background of why a committee was either recommended or why that would be a solution in this situation. Because committees that we have actually set up are ways that give us recommendations, or recommendations come from the committees to this council, and then we make a decision on whether we act on those recommendations or not. And the speaker mentioned that the committee could then direct officers or have information go straight to officers. That's not necessarily how the council works. There is a layer where the community has access to officers, but all decision making is made by this council. Because if it's not done that way, then we can have a time period where officers can just go off and do whatever they like, and then that's not in the best interest of the community. So we're here as those gatekeepers for where money is spent, what initiatives that take place, what happens through the budget and the process. We go through that every year, and the community as well should be a huge part of that and involved in that. So, just questioning that small point, Mayor, but very supportive.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Councillor Matt, did you want to speak?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. And just thank you, Mayor. Just recognise the work that goes into bringing a petition like this together, so well done. It's an increasing issue that doesn't stop at our borders either. That needs to be recognised, obviously. Now, I know I've put cameras up at my place for the first time, for this exact reason, and in different pockets of our city particularly. These issues rear their head in different ways. There's a forum that Councillor O'Kane and I and some of the officers, the Banyule Policing Forum, if I've got that right, might operate once every 6 months. Just looking for a nod. Yeah, once every 6 months. I'd encourage you to get around, Helen? Once a year, beg your pardon. Do you have to wait till next year? Very good forum though to discuss these matters directly. And the point I was raising earlier, don't stop with our state member for Ivanhoe, who happens to be the police minister. It's not good enough that he's not responding. He needs to be. He needs to be representing our direct community, firstly, and the issues more broadly. So I'd encourage you to get your group together, get noisy, and keep banging on that door. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Did any other councillor wish to speak to the item? Councillor Alida.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the petitioners for bringing this matter before Council and for advocating on behalf of residents who are concerned about community safety, property crime, vandalism and neighbourhood amenity. The level of community interest in this issue is clearly significant, and it's important not only that Council listens carefully, but that the officer response does circle back to the Council chamber for transparency and accountability, which is why I would like to foreshadow an amendment that I did present earlier to the councillor group, that if this doesn't get up, that we indeed essentially put up the same motion but with an additional point, and that is that the officer's resolution actually come back to this council chamber. Many of you will be aware that we are actually hosting a community meeting this Thursday, and the focus of that meeting will be community safety, and it's in response to the level of interest we have received, councillors have received in relation to this matter. So I think it is really important that on a matter of such community interest, it does circle back to the council chamber. So whilst in principle I support the 3 points that are presented on the screen as part of the motion, I cannot support it unless we see that 4th point, and that it circle back to this council chamber to better understand publicly what the officer resolution is. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Did any other councillor wish to speak? Okay, thank you. I now put that in motion. All those in favour? She hasn't said anything. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, that is moved. No, that is carried. It's moved and carried. Moved and carried. Item 8.1, endorsement of council positions on motions for the MAV State Council meeting, 29th of May 2026. We have one speaker to this item. Michelle Jovis, representing Friends of Banyule, is with us in person this evening and is speaking for the item. Welcome, Michelle. You have 2 minutes.
Thanks. I'm speaking specifically to the part of the motion dealing with big build projects. There's no doubt that the North East Link TBM tunnelling is an engineering feat. However, large sections of this project have been a disaster for Banyule residents and businesses in Watsonia, McLeod and Yalambee, and lesser extents to Bundoora, Viewbank, Heidelberg, Rosanna and Bundoora. Families have suffered through vibration, dust, diesel fumes, noise and light pollution, as well as traffic, parking and safety issues. While our local environment has suffered through ongoing water pollution issues and our wildlife continues to be killed and trapped in our suburban streets. I commend Motion 26, support for the delivery of promised outcomes in Victoria's big build projects, and Council's advocacy to the EPA to get better independent air and water quality monitoring. Motion 26 calls for the UDLP, the Urban Design and Landscape Plan, to be delivered in full, which includes the underground wildlife crossing at Banyule Creek, which, currently NALP have reneged on. And Friends of Banyule have a petition to State Parliament calling for the wildlife crossing to be reinstated. And the closing date for this has been extended to September. This motion is vital and should be fought for to ensure better outcomes for Banyule, particularly with the current project failures and emissions, and in view of the Rutherford Street LXRP project, which is fast approaching. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Michelle. Nice to see you back. Before we move to the motion, are there any questions of officers? There are none. Okay, I'm calling for a motion. Do I have a mover? Councillor Elizabeth Neely. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Alicia Curry. Councillor Neely, would you like to speak to the item?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So, as the report says, Banyule will be voting on 84 motions at the State Council meeting this Friday. We meet twice a year to vote on key strategic items that impact the whole entire local government sector. So we submitted 2 motions coming from Councillor Curry and Councillor Castaldo to this forum, and other councillors had input, so thank you to all my fellow councillors on this who contributed. And it was about supporting the delivery of promised outcomes in the Victorian big build projects. And we put this forward to urge the government to ensure habitat corridors, support biodiversity, as our speaker just mentioned, Michelle Jovis, are delivered. And we also urge that pollution is managed and environmental disturbances are minimised. And this links into the 24-hour truck ban on local roads, as well as installing filtration along the project. The motions that were raised by other councils, I felt, covered almost every topic, category, issue that we face in this country. And I just wanted to list a few of the overarching topics, and I couldn't even shorten it more than what I've got for now. So support for councillors across Victoria, planning sector reform, public library funding, gambling reforms, AI and cybersecurity capability for local government, transport issues, community health and wellbeing, and another one was funding for suicide prevention, improving the frequency of bus services, road maintenance, biodiversity strategies, including weed and pest management. So that doesn't even cover, not even half of the topics that we'll be voting on this Friday. The top priorities for rural councils really do differ to urban councils. However, the common issue that we all face is a constrained environment, rate capping, less grants, and cost shifting from the state. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Alicia is the seconder. Would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to speak directly to our motion that we've put forward. So as the Speaker said, Michelle, thank you for speaking. Motion 26, support for delivery of promised outcomes of Victorian Big Build. We've actually had a supporting council through Manningham to get this motion through. We hope to have success showing the other LGAs, other council areas, that it's not just us impacted by the one thing that is North East Link, that across Victoria and particularly through metropolitan Melbourne, there's lots of projects like the SRL, we've got other tunnels being built, and we're all impacted with the same scenario, that the projects come up through state government. They garner support by making promises to the community. They alleviate concerns by giving responses through some of those consultations. And then they slowly renege on these, slowly deteriorate what we're getting back. So we've put this through to support the truck ban, which is part of our state election advocacy campaign. It's the provision of the wildlife crossing, which was promised in the project design from Watsonia to Rosanna in 2023, with a very specific wildlife corridor under Lower Plenty Road will connect Borlase Reserve to Banyule Flats. That's been reneged on. We desperately need provision of enough parking and the traffic mitigations. Council are picking up the slack for this state project. I get emails every week, I'm sure a number of councillors do. We're having to deal with that, those mitigations. We're having to provide the mitigations because they're being lost by state government, and we want to highlight this to not just benefit us, to benefit other parts, other projects and other parts of Victoria. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor. All right, would any other councillor like to speak to the item? Councillor Matt?
I wasn't going to, but Councillor Curry's got me going now. I'll just add a few details to the North East Link situation. And yesterday they had a great photo opportunity with the tunnel boring machine coming through at Bulleen. Great. Can't wait for the second one to get through and get this out of our hair. But they talked about 9,000 people being employed. Great. 6,000 of them, I'm told, are between Watsonia and Lower Plenty Road, and not one car park between any of them, just to be clear. That's what we're dealing with. Some of the issues that have been brought up by our Speaker and Councillor Curry. There's also there's a road that was promised to be reconnected into Yallambie that has been deleted. And they've said that they've consulted community. Well enough, they haven't. So we've got an estate there, at Colleen Drive, it's called. You can look it up, which won't have lost a way into their estate now. With no real recourse. So it goes on, and at all of this 15,000 trucks a day that they're going to take off the road, there's no guarantee. We've got to understand that. They have not put in the truck controls to guarantee that these trucks won't be off our road. And it's a ludicrous situation. And I don't think enough of our community know about it, but we're going to be stepping up our advocacy on this coming forward. So good work, good luck. See what MAV can do for us. Very good, thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? Councillor Mark.
Mayor, thank you. Yeah, just acknowledging Michelle coming in speaking this evening. She's a very valued member of the Banyule Environmental Committee. And Mayor and Councillors, it's always very good when members of the committees come in and do speak, take the time to come in and speak, as they do have other obligations with those committees. So thank you, Michelle, for coming in. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Liz, you're the mover. Right of reply? No? Okay. I'm now putting that in motion. All those in favour? That is carried. Item 8.2, Audit and Risk Committee Minutes. We have one speaker on this item. Kavan Hill from Banyule Ratepayers Action Group is speaking in person against the item. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you, Mayor. Lonely old Mayor. I speak against the Risk and Audit Committee's reported finding that the transformation strategy sits within the Council's risk appetite. On the Committee's own evidence, that finding is not safe. Officers told the Committee that break-even occurs at plus 10% on cost and minus 15% on benefits. Councillors, that is a knife edge. Birmingham's Oracle program ran more than 10 times over budget and tipped that council into effective bankruptcy. Queensland Health ran on nearly 200 times over Gartner forecast that by 2027, over 70% of the new ERP programs will fail their business case. A plus 10, minus 15 tolerance is not a risk appetite. It is an assumption that Banyule will outperform almost every comparable program on record. The governance response is equally thin. Action 7 asks Council only to consider an independent advisor. Action 8 buries transformation, reporting inside routine cyber updates. There is no ring-fenced intelligent customer function inside Council, and that gap is what Grant Thornton identified as central to Birmingham's collapse. No binding out-of-the-box rule, no published exit positions, no lift in contingency towards the 25 to 30% the sector demands. So I ask councillors tonight, do not simply receive item 8.2, refer it back to the Risk and Audit Committee with a direction to respond formally to Bragg's 18 recommendations, which were sent to the CEO and the Mayor, and to require, before any contract is signed, a properly resourced, intelligent customer team reporting independently of the systems integrator. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kevin. Councillors have any questions at all? Nope. Councillor Mark.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. My question is, the Speaker mentioned of 18 points that have been directed to our CEO. Will councillors have access to those 18 points for our own evaluation? Thank you.
Yes, you will.
No, Mayor, with respect, this is a big decision we made.
That was forwarded on receipt last week to all the councillors.
So that came, through you, Mayor, so that that information came through to councillors from Bragg specifically, or from officers to councillors?
From the Mayor to the councillors.
Mayor, in the event that a councillor was on leave during that time, how does that then get picked up in the process? Thank you.
Okay, I'll answer. Yeah. Through you, Mayor, the correspondence has been received. Myself and the Director of Corporate Services are reviewing that information, and we'll come back and brief the council before a response is written. So you'll all be briefed on those points that we're considering with the due respect that they need at the moment.
Does any other councillor have a question? Councillor Mary.
Thank you, Mayor. To the relevant director. What are the precautionary mechanisms that we have in place for the business transformation project that will enable us to keep control of those financial costs? Thank you.
Point of order, Mayor. With the greatest of respect.
Go ahead, Councillor.
This item is Audit and Risk Committee minutes, not business transformation strategy. I just don't think it's appropriate to drill into that now. It is a big project. We're going to talk to it now, shortly, but I'm just not sure that this item right now is the time to really be... There was 500 pages of papers and a 3-hour meeting. We could be here all night, Mayor.
You're happy with that, Councillor Mary? Okay, great. So there's an officer's report set out in the agenda papers. I'm calling for a motion. Do I have a mover? Councillor Matt. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mary. Councillor Matt, as the mover, would you like to speak to the item? Yes. You sure? Yes, okay.
We shouldn't joke. Yes, it was a big meeting. Yeah, there's 500 pages in the papers, and we sit there for it was about 3.5 hours this meeting, and it's deep, the audit and risk. We cover a lot, and yes, business transformation was the hot topic in this meeting, but there was a few other things, and I'm going to do my best to summarise the meeting, and I will focus on the BTS. So a couple of general comments. The cybersecurity audit scope was tabled, so this leads to what we're talking about. The committee discussed the recent impacts of cyber attacks on other local government agencies due to their close connection to communities and perceived vulnerabilities, and requested a high-level dashboard summary to identify third-party vendors holding critical or high-risk data on behalf of Council. The endorsed transformation program will introduce significant changes to Council's cybersecurity footprint and structure, with a specific cybersecurity audit scope into the program to capture the changes and confirm protections are consistent within the new cyber footprint. Quickly, enterprise risk heavy fleet was tabled, and it was really good work. We're looking at fleet management. I'm going to move straight on. Business transformation. So it was formally listed for noting, and Councillor O'Kane and I brought it forward for active discussion, and it was a deep conversation. The committee was broadly supportive of the direction. I'm going to skip through this. So key caution, clear and consistent view from the committee that success or failure will ultimately rest on people and change management, not the plan alone. And you'll remember that we moved in our amendment to offer support for our CEO in change management. The most significant outcome talks to the Speaker's comments potentially. The committee unanimously recommended Council appoint an independent specialist to the steering committee, and strongly supported by all the ARC members and endorsed by Internal Audit ASTA, and this formed part of the resolve recommendation at our last Council meeting. So with ongoing oversight, the committee resolved to receive a summary update at every ARC meeting for the life of the program, ensure continued visibility, ongoing scrutiny and active governance. And I'll just wrap it up by saying that I hear what you're saying, but you've got to appreciate that this is exceptionally complex. And the reason that we introduced the gates and the independent advisor was, and the staged approach to approving funding, was that we can work our way through this slowly and pick up what's coming before us, so that we're not at the extreme example that you used at the other end, and we've got a disaster on our hands. We'll be able to work through it, and that's what we intend to do. I'll leave it at that for now. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Did any other Councillor? Councillor Mary.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So the overall across the 15 reports presented to the Audit and Risk Committee, the Audit and Risk Committee was satisfied with the continuing maturity of Council's internal controls, while also providing constructive feedback. So I will discuss 3 items. First, regarding the external VAGO audit of Council's financial statements, performance statements and acquittals, again undertaken by HLB Mann Judd. The committee was pleased to note that Council has engaged an external valuer for land and building assets. This is important as it ensures Banyul's assets are recorded at fair value in the annual balance sheet, strengthening reliability of our financial reporting. The committee also was satisfied that the audit is progressing in line with the agreed timetable, and with the interim audit actually commencing today. I think that was on the schedule. Second, the audit activity, the internal audit activity for January to March quarter, the internal auditor ASTA reported on the commencement of audit reviews in tendering and environmental health, and as Councillor Wood said, development of the scope of upcoming reviews on protect components of the cybersecurity and fleet management. Third, officers presented the mid-year local government performance reporting framework report. While this is an annual report, this was prepared voluntarily. Of the 31 indicators, 24 are on track, 2 are within range, 5 are unlikely to meet their target but with known causes. So while the committee noted strong results in statutory planning frameworks and library loans, discussion focused on pressures on curbside waste collection related to increased housing density and the impacts associated with the North East Link project. Officers acknowledge these pressures, noting that there is no single solution. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the item? Councillor Mark?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I think the comments this evening from our Speaker are quite relevant. As I spoke in the evening when we did make the decision to authorise a digital transformation, it's over a $40 million project over many years, and that's very nervous. I still am nervous about that decision. And for our Speaker to mention that the risk from the committee is in scope is good to be questioned, because it's never been done before. So we don't know what's going to happen. So we don't have to defend the Audit and Risk Committee. They can stand up for themselves. They're very highly paid and very highly respected professionals, and they need to bring us reports on decisions that we need to make on behalf of the community. So we don't need to defend them. They'll be defending themselves as it continues to eventuate and roll out. But I do ask that the committee does come to us when things do go astray, when the risk appetite does get too large, because that's when we need to know early on. We don't want to know after the fact. I would be liking this committee to say, hey, this is a really high risk, councillors, very high risk, very brave decision you've made, but we're going to go on with it anyway. So thank you very much for the comments that were made tonight, and I please encourage the community to continue questioning any of the advice we're getting. If they think it's inaccurate, we need as much information as we can possibly get. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor. Did any other councillor wish to speak to the item? Okay. Councillor Matt, as the mover, would you like a right of reply? No. Okay, thank you. All right, I now put that in motion. All those in favour? That is carried. Item 8.3, Proposed Budget 2026 to 2030, Declarations of Conflict of Interest. So, Councillor Curry, we note you have a general conflict of interest with the budget allocation listed in the overall budget for the Heidelberg Theatre Company. As you disclosed this at the start of the meeting, the report provides you the opportunity to manage that conflict of interest in accordance with your obligations. It is important to note that after this item is determined, you do not then have a conflict in the overall budget as listed in the next item, 8.4. So I will now ask you to leave the chamber, please, for this item. Okay. So there are no speakers on this item. So before we move to the motion, do we have any questions of officers from councillors? None? No? Okay. We have a report before us that's set out in the papers. Given Councillor Curry's declared conflict, we have an amended motion in front of us. I think we do. Okay. Am I the one who's reading it out? Okay. Okay. Reading the motion that Council 1 approves or not approves the allocation of funding of $500,000 for the Heidelberg Theatre Company for inclusion of the proposed budget 2026-2030 as detailed in report 8.4 proposed budget 2026-2030 for public exhibition. 2. Notes Councillor Alicia Curry declared a general conflict of interest in the budget allocation for the Heidelberg Theatre Company for item 8.4, proposed budget 2026-2030 for public exhibition. And note that Councillor Curry did not participate in consideration and vote on the allocation of funding for the Heidelberg Theatre Company. 3. Notes that in line with Resolution 1 and Resolution 2 as per 7.1 R of the Local Government Governance and Integrity Regulations, Councillor Curry is now exempt from conflict of interest requirements for the endorsement of the proposed budget 2026-2030 at item 8.4, where the Heidelberg Theatre Company will be included / not included.
So, Mayor,
Okay.
I'm happy to move, and with point 1 approve, and in point 3 include. So moved.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Oh. Councillor Elizabeth Neely. You don't wish to speak, Councillor Liz? Would anyone, Councillor, like to speak to the item? All right, I put that in motion. All those in favour? That is carried. Councillor Curry will return to the room. Welcome back. Item 8.4, Proposed Budget 2026 to 2030 for public exhibition. There is one speaker on this item. So we have Jai Sanford is speaking in person for the item. Welcome, Jai. You have 2 minutes.
Thanks, councillors. First, I want to genuinely commend council and officers for putting forward a budget that actually reflects the reality people are living through right now. We're obviously in the middle of a cost of living crisis, and people are struggling with surviving with their mortgages, groceries, insurance, and energy bills. And in that context, effectively delivering a rate freeze, which is a good marketing opportunity, by the way, while making land bankers and people who own vacant lots contribute more, is a genuinely excellent public policy. Because for once, the burden is not being dumped onto ordinary residents while wealthier property owners get protected. Dare I say it? This is probably the closest thing Banyule has gotten to socialist economic policy, and I mean that as a genuine compliment. It is progressive, redistributive, and actually focused on protecting ordinary people during a difficult economic period. The one area where I think council should go even further is support for charities and local community organisations. During our cost of living crisis, these groups become essential for some in our community, and particularly in 3081. These organisations are the ones feeding people, supporting isolated residents, and helping families survive extremely difficult times while successive state and federal governments continue to fail them. So overall, I think this budget is a genuinely strong and progressive step forward, and I hope council continues building on that by increasing funding for local community organisations in this budget and keeping the same general direction in future years. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Jai. You have a question for the officer?
Mayor, if I may ask a question of the appropriate officer, there was a comment made with regards to rate revenue. Could I, for the appropriate officer, if we bring in rates as a council, if we bring in rates from a particular property more than what they are paying now, does that increase the revenue, or does that just redistribute the rate dollar across the board?
Through you, Mayor, if I understand the question correctly, is that total revenue from rates is going to increase by the rate cap of 2.75%, which doesn't necessarily translate into an individual property that'll pay 2.75% because it's depending on what their revaluation of their property is, and it's the proportion of that total revenue that gets apportioned to that particular property. So it could be greater than 2.75, could be 2.75, it could be even less than 2.75, but depending on the rate movement of that given revaluation year. Hopefully that answers your question.
Not quite, Mayor. Just following up that question. So if 10 properties were charged an extra $100 for their rates in a particular year, would that mean that our rate revenue would go up by that $1,000, or would it be redistributed and we'd still get the same amount of rates in?
through you, Mayor, irrespective of the valuation of those particular properties, the rate revenue only goes up by the rate cap. So if those properties are revalued, for example, that doesn't result in an extra revenue for council. It just determines their proportion of the rates they pay of that given year.
Councillor Rick, Deputy Mayor, has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I have a question too, and because it could have implications for how we resolve. But in terms of the budget, there's a figure quoted of 2.6 million in the capital program for the Banyule Transformation Strategy and 6.1 million in initiatives for that strategy, totalling 8.7 million. The executive summary references a figure of 6.7 million. What should be the appropriate figure that's referenced in the executive summary to tie back to those other two figures in the budget document?
Through you, Mayor, I think you're referring to an executive summary of the initiatives budget of 13.2. The digital transformation, the business transformation strategy is in two components, one of an operating nature, which is the 6.07, which is a correction to the actual summary, and with the remainder being a capital expense of $2.6 million. So in the executive summary, it only refers to the operating part of that. What we should have done and can do with the exhibition of the budget is we can add that 2.6 into the capital expenditure, which then will total 8.7.
Okay, thank you. Did any other councillor have a question of officers before? No. Okay. Calling for a motion. Do we have a mover? We have a mover. Councillor Alida McKern is mover, and we've got a seconder of Deputy Mayor Councillor Rick Grotti. Councillor Alida, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I think tonight's item is an important step because it places the proposed budget 2026 to 2030 and associated plans on public exhibition, allowing the community the opportunity to review, consider and provide further feedback before adoption in the future, which will happen in June. Preparing a council budget in the current environment is not an easy task. Councils are expected to deliver more services, maintain ageing infrastructure, respond to climate and community challenges and support growing community expectations, all within the constraints of the state government rate cap, which was just alluded to. At the same time, many households are under real financial pressure. We know from organisations such as BANSIC Food Hub, which is a food relief agency for the southern half of the Banyule, that more residents are seeking food relief support, including increasing numbers from traditionally more affluent suburbs such as Ivanhoe and East Ivanhoe. That context matters when considering the budget. What I think this proposed budget attempts to do is balance financial responsibility with continued investment in the infrastructure and services our community values most. One of the strongest themes is investment in community assets and livability. There is significant continued investment in parks, playgrounds and public open space across the city. The everyday places that contribute enormously to physical health, mental well-being and social connection. The budget also contains investment in sporting, recreation infrastructure, including works associated with Olympic Village at the Olympic Leisure Centre and the nearby Shelley Pavilion. It's also encouraging to see continued commitment to environmental sustainability initiatives, including biodiversity, waste reduction and climate response actions, which remain critically important to Banyule's long-term future. I also want to acknowledge the strategic importance of the Ivanhoe Aquatic Centre upgrade and electrification project as a major long-term piece of community infrastructure for Banyule. No budget is going to be perfect, and there'll always be competing priorities and difficult decisions. But overall, as has been mentioned by the Speaker, this proposed budget presents a solid platform for further community discussion and refinement during the exhibition period. I will, however, have other comments to make with regards to the revenue and rating plan. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor, I just had a question of the mover. There were some amendments to the budget that I would at least was hoping to move. Were they agreeable to you as the mover, or? Well, if we appear on the next slide, there's some amendments to the budget, because otherwise I'll have to foreshadow an amendment to your resolution.
I'll just take a moment to be comfortable with it, if that's okay with you, Seconder.
And there's another slide.
Consistent with the themes. Happy to support the Seconder's motion changes.
Can I just clarify with our governance rules? I believe that you've seconded the motion, so you've foreshadowed. We would need another councillor to approach you as the mover and seconder around this.
I haven't seconded yet. I hadn't raised
right.
my
Okay.
Yeah, I queried before I seconded.
Okay.
So no
And
one's.
then I need someone to second.
Councillor Mary has just seconded Councillor Alita's move.
Or were you going to second?
Mayor, may
Councillor
I,
Mark.
if possible, may I request of the mover and the seconder that there's some additions that we can make to this evening's 8.4, if they're amenable to the mover and the seconder, we could go through those. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Mark, can you please repeat your question?
Mayor, from my understanding, we have the motion was the mover was Councillor McKern. Was it seconded by Councillor Garotti?
Councillor Rick is advising he was not actually seconding.
Okay, who seconded that motion, Mayor? I can't remember.
So now.
Thank you.
Just a point of clarification is if Councillor McKern is moving, has she agreed to these amendments at the moment? Yeah, okay,
Yes.
thank you. I didn't hear.
So can I ask that the mover now read these additional out, because this is the motion that you're moving, and then we'll seek a seconder for that, please.
That council in point 2...
Can you just put your mic on?
The proposed budget 26 to 2030 for exhibition with the following changes. A, correction to a typographical error on page 2 of the budget document that refers to the Council's transformation program, which is to be corrected from 6.7 to 6.1 million. And B, the inclusion of additional wording within the Mayor and Chief Executive Officer's introduction. Council recognises that many in our community are experiencing real financial strain as the cost of living continues to rise. We are committed to ensuring that support is available to those who need it most. Our rates financial hardship policy enables Council to respond flexibly and compassionately, offering practical assistance to help eligible ratepayers manage their obligations during difficult times, while continuing to sustain the services our community relies on. And the next point, 2C, an additional allocation of up to $50,000 to facilitate a contingency pool of funding to support official partner service providers that may be experiencing unanticipated economic pressures. Applications to access this funding will be managed through an administrative process delegated to the Director of Community Wellbeing, with all applications being evaluated against the level of community impact and need. And the addition of point 6, note its continuing fee relief and financial hardship options at Council's aquatic facilities, and receive a report outlining uptake and community awareness of supports in place.
And seconder, Councillor Rick Grotti. Okay. Councillor Leader, as the mover, would you like to speak to the item? Councillor Rick, as the seconder, would you like to speak to the item?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So this is a great budget for our community. We're delivering a surplus of $10.4 million. I noticed that one of our speakers mentioned that it's a socialist budget. I'm not too aware of too many socialist governments that deliver surpluses, but thank you for the credit. We've got a healthy and sustainable capital works program of $71.7 million. And we're providing ongoing support for those facing financial hardship through our policy, which is one of the most generous and supportive in the country, as we understand it. Certainly the highlight in our budget is our rates and charges. Rates are only going up by 2% next year, compared to a CPI increase to March 2026 of 4.6%. Our increase in rates is 50%, 57% lower than CPI. And in fact, our public waste rate is going down by 13.2%. In the next item, there's going to be much debate about how to allocate those costs. Well, the good news in this budget is that everyone in Banyule is going to see a significant reduction in their waste rate. That's something worth celebrating. That's something worth highlighting. Now, it's interesting that out there, Bragg has been running a campaign on whether councillors are keeping their election promises. In my case, at least, it notes that I pledged to minimise rates. So given that what we're adopting tonight, will Bragg report to the community that I have delivered on my election promise? Thank you, Mayor.
You're a very funny man, Deputy Mayor. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the item? Oh, eeny meeny, Councillor Liz. No, Councillor Liz. Councillor Mark.
Just cutting through all the black and white
Mark.
writing for the residents. So this is going out to public exhibition, which I'm supportive of, and also the amendments this evening. 22nd of June. So any community organisation, community members, if anything has gone awry with the budget process or their submissions to the budget, please do contact us. You have all our contact details. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Liz.
Yeah, and not to repeat what Councillor Grotti said or Councillor Di Pasquale, it already has been through an engagement process, and residents will have a final opportunity to provide feedback. And I also just wanted to mention we are pleased to be able to deliver $71 million of the capital works. A question that we receive a lot as councillors, me particular in Beale Ward, is, what are you doing with the roads? What are you doing with the streetscapes? What are you doing with the footpaths? We're spending $7.7 million on roads, and that's a lot of money. You can always spend more, but I think that we have to note, the rising costs that we're facing. $4 million we're spending just on footpaths. So this council is maintaining a sound financial position with disciplined financial management. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Mary.
Thank you, Mayor. As always, a significant amount of work has gone into preparing this four-year budget, and I would like to acknowledge and thank the officers, particularly the executive management team and our finance team for that work. I see this draft budget as characterised by 4 key themes. First, fiscal discipline in a challenging economic environment. Council continues to operate under tight conditions compounded by broader economic uncertainty. Within that, the budget operating surplus of around $10 million places Council in a position to meet its short-term obligations, manage risk and continue planned investment. Importantly, Council maintains a strong liquidity position, conservative debt levels and established reserves, which together support our financial resilience. Second, care for the vulnerability in our community. This was reflected in support for the inclusive employment pathways, Banyul's rates, financial hardship policy and increased investment in homelessness. These targeted responses benefit people across all of Banyul. Third, genuine community engagement. Every line aligns with the Banyul plan, which is grounded in extensive community consultation. Releasing this draft budget for community feedback is the next step in this process. Fourth, the courage to address the hard basket issues. This includes major initiatives such as the Business Transformation Project and ongoing infrastructure renewal such as Ivanhoe Aquatics. These are necessary investments to ensure Council is fit for the future, and even if they are complex or costly in the short term. Finally, I note that while the budget includes a significantly increased underlying deficit, there is expected in the medium term. It is expected in the medium term, and it will be carefully monitored. Council's consistent financial performance gives me confidence that in its ability to manage this responsibly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Alicia.
Thank you, Mayor. It's always a challenging document to move through. This is out for public exhibition once again. It's had a lot of community consultation. Thanks to the other councillors, I've added insight into this document and provided some very clear messages that Council is putting out. I think cost of living is always at the forefront of balancing our budget, but we do have an obligation to maintain high standards, the provision of infrastructure and providing for our most vulnerable, in addition to services and initiatives where required. So we do have to recover our costs in the waste space, and that's what we charge for. So some of the actions commencing in July 2026 is develop a biodiversity monitoring program for Banyul. We also talk about creating local jobs and pathways opportunities for people experiencing barriers to work, very, very important. With this budget, we're also delivering advocacy priorities to secure funding and influence policy. And there are a couple of new fees that are being introduced with this budget which cover the car share parking fees and the electric vehicle charging fees. These are required for ongoing costs that Council incur. We had been hoping for an EV take-up with the incentive of the EV charges. We can't actually tell whether that is occurring. So Council has decided to, wisely I think, is introduce these electric vehicle charging machines, but still open to consultation. So we'll finally adopt this in the June budget, in the June meeting. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Did any other councillor wish to speak? I'll just make one comment. I wasn't going to, but I was inspired by our speaker. This is going out for public exhibition and it is on our website. If you don't have digital copy, one of us can get it to you. The budget is very long. It is in very small writing. There are lots and lots of items and projects. We read it every Christmas time. It's our Christmas reading. The word socialist doesn't spring to mind to describe this budget at all. So may I suggest from tomorrow, until the 25th of June. I think it's Monday the 23rd of June. Sorry, we're adopting this, or the 22nd. Please read it and you'll see it's not. It's not any particular agenda. It's not any political agenda. It's simply a budget that looks after our community and maintains services and has a variety of capital works projects that looks after our community as well and its needs. Thank you. Who moved that after that? Alida. Councillor Alida, as the mover, would you like a right of reply? Okay. I'm putting that in motion. All those in favour? And that is carried. Item 8.5, Adoption of Revenue and Rating Plan 2026 to 2030. There are 5 speakers on this item. Our first speaker is Jai Sanford, who is going to address the Council in person and is speaking for the recommendation. Jai, you have 2 minutes.
Thanks, councillors. Thanks for entertaining my first speech. I want to say that I strongly support council maintaining a CIV-based waste charging model. I'm sure we'll hear a few other opinions tonight. I think it's one of the fairest approaches the council can take because it at least attempts to link rates to people's capacity to pay. I think moving to a flat waste charge would be a regressive step backwards. Based on publicly available council data and budgets, I calculated that most residents in 7 out of 9 wards would pay more under a flat fee model, a minimum of 10% more. Based on my calculations, residents seeing the highest increase would be in Grimshaw, who would typically pay about 30% more in waste charges, and in my ward, Olympia, residents would typically see a 20% increase. The only beneficiaries would be for Chelsworth and Griffin residents, who would typically pay 17% and 27% less, respectively. Why would we be entertaining trickle-down economics? Because the winners and losers under this change are pretty obvious. Is the current model perfect? No. But it is a far fairer system than a flat fee that ignores Banyul's extreme wealth differences entirely. Moreover, user-pay systems are simply just not fair, equitable, or equal. If we move to a user-pay system in health and education, many people in this room would be missing out or would have missed out, including myself. Council already has hardship provisions for people genuinely struggling financially, such as those who are asset-rich and cash-poor. If those policies need strengthening, then strengthen them. But at a time when people are struggling with the cost of living, councillors should not even be considering policies that effectively take from poorer households to give to wealthier ones and make at least 3/4 of ratepayers worse off. I strongly urge council to retain the CIV-based model and reject any push toward a flat waste charge. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jai. Our second speaker is David Mulholland from Banyul Ratepayers Action Group, speaking in person against.
Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome.
On behalf of the many hundreds of residents across Banyul who signed our petition, some of whom are here tonight in the gallery and many online, Bragg urges Council not to adopt the Revenue and Rating Plan in its current form because it entrenches one of the most unfair taxation models in local government, Banyul's uncapped property value-based waste rate. Let's be clear what this means in practice. 2 households can receive the same bins, the same trucks, the same collections, yet pay vastly different amounts simply because one home is worth more than the other. That is not user pays. That is not transparent. And it certainly is not equitable. The report repeatedly talks about fairness and capacity to pay, but waste collection is not an income tax system. A rubbish truck does not cost more to stop outside a house in Eaglemont than it does in Watsonia. Instead, this plan locks residents into uncapped waste charges, increasing cross-subsidisation, and a rating system disconnected from the actual service provided. Council argues this approach reflects capacity to pay, but many residents are asset rich and income poor. Pensioners, long-term residents, widows, families who bought decades ago before property values increased. They are being punished simply because their suburb became more valuable. And while Council talks about hardship policies, hardship should not be used as an excuse to justify an unfair system in the first place. I ask councillors tonight to reject this plan and return with a truly fair and transparent waste charging model like 77 of the 79 councils in Victoria that reflects the service provided. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. Okay. Deputy Mayor Councillor Rick has a question of the Speaker.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mayor. And through yourself, Mr Mulholland references a petition and of up to over 200 signatories, I believe. But I was just wondering if Mr Mulholland is able to shed any light on how many of those signatories are renters in the City of Banyule, through you, Mayor.
No, we actually didn't ask whether they were renting or whether they were ratepayers. It's interesting to note that there was actually 171 petitioners. We had a further 300 that sent in emails, but they weren't accepted by council. But,
okay.
Yep.
That's lovely. Thank you. Thank you for that.
And Mayor, just a second brief follow-up question,
Yep.
If that be okay with Mr Mulholland,
Fine.
through yourself.
Yep.
Just confirming that he is representing the Banyule Ratepayers Action Group.
We actually have two groups. One is the Banyule Ratepayers Action Group, BRAG, but we also have another incorporated body, which is the Banyule Residents Action Group.
And and tonight, are you representing Banyule Ratepayers?
No, both.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Councillor Matt.
Sorry for the Speaker. You'll get fit
I'm getting
doing
my
that.
exercise, Councillor.
Well done. Just with regards to our first speaker's comments, can you tell me what percentage of your signatories were in Griffin and Charlesworth?
I actually sent all that information through to councillors. I haven't got that information tonight, but I did send it through to an email to every councillor. So you would also already have that information.
Thank you.
Yep.
Does any other councillor have a question? Okay. Next speaker is Kevin Hill from Bragg, who's speaking in person against the item. Welcome, Kevin. You have 2 minutes.
Thanks, Mayor. Before you start the clock, I'm not speaking on behalf of Bragg after that grilling. I'm speaking as a private individual. Thank you very much, and not a socialist.
Thank you.
I echo the comments and sentiments of the previous speaker. The Essential Services Commission was approached by Whitehorse Council to obtain a brief about what was the best way to charge for curbside waste, and the Essential Service Commission came out and said, do it as a fixed charge. Now, 77 out of 79 councils have adopted that, Melbourne Council being one of the outliers and Banyule being the other. So that means that 2 councils have got the smarts and the other bunch of councils are lagging behind, so to speak. The officer report tells you a CIV-based service rate is progressive. Now, we're starting to use this in a social, political way and not in a strictly economic and taxation point of view. It says it's progressive and reflects capacity to pay. With respect, that is the justification for general rates. It is not justification for a waste charge. A waste service is not a redistribution program. It is a bin, a truck and a tip fee. The cost of emptying my bin is the same as the cost of emptying my neighbour's bin, and so on. The Minister's own good practice guidelines, quoted on page 26 of the officer report, says a service rate must be limited to recovering the reasonable cost of the relevant service and set on a fair and transparent basis. A formula that charges one household 3 or 4 times what another pays for an identical bin is not recovering the cost of the service, it is recovering something else. And the officer report is candid about what that something else is. In writing, it says that the service rate, quote, assists council to manage waste costs that may increase beyond inflation within the rate capping environment. Wow. Translated, the rate is useful because it sits outside the cap, Parliament imposed. That's not a feature, that's a problem. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kevin. We have a pre-recorded video message from Keith McLaughlin speaking against the item.
Mayor and councillors, I'm Keith McLaughlin, ratepayer. I'm speaking to the budget, item 8.51, draft revenue and rating plan, and particularly the curbside waste charge. As a candidate in Griffin Ward, at the last elections, I knocked on hundreds of doors. One issue came up again and again, rates, and particularly the household curbside waste charge. In Banyule, this charge is still linked to property value. In 2025, it was about $253 per $1 million of property value. So a $2 million property costs $506 for the same red, yellow and green bin service. By comparison, areas such as Kew charge a fixed fee, around $317, and many Melbourne councils use the fixed charge. The problem is simple. Property value has no meaningful connection to the amount of waste a household produces or the cost of collecting it. Banyule's model is increasingly difficult to reconcile with the Vic government's own good practice guide. A property value-based waste rate charges different households different amounts for the same bins, same trucks and same collection service. Councils face real waste costs, but those costs relate to service delivery, not property wealth. I ask councillors to use the draft budget process to move toward fairer, fee-for-service model with variations only for genuine differences in service level. Same bins, same service, same charge.
Thank you very much, Keith. And our final speaker has issued a written statement speaking against the item, to be read out by Darren Bennett, our Director of Assets and City Services.
I'm just wanting to reiterate my previous concern expressed to my ward councillor and mayor, Councillor Alison Champion, as you consider this matter. My concern is in summary are: I firmly believe that the charge should be set on the waste service delivered to each property and not based on property values. As I have said, this proposed continued method of charging based on property values will basically see all properties in Sackville, St Morency paying different amounts for the same waste services. The ministerial guidelines in part state the use of service charges as opposed to service rates based on property value for the purpose of waste, recycling or resource recovery services, commonly known as a curbside waste collection, is good practice, as there is a clear nexus between the amount of to be levied on the occupancy and the cost of the specific service being provided to the same occupancy. This allows the composition and setting of the service charge to be easily explained and justified to the community. It is not good practice for a council to apply a service rate for the purpose of waste, recycling or resource recovery services, commonly known as a curbside waste collection, as the amount levied on each assessment will be primarily determined by the value of the property, not the cost of the specific service rendered. Such a practice is difficult to justify to the community in accordance with the good taxation principles above, as each assessment will be levied at a different amount while all receiving an identical service. I look forward to your support to have council apply a service charge rather than a service rate in accordance with ministerial guidelines.
Thank you, Darren. Just to be clear, that is Sackville Street, Montmorency, not to be confused with Sackville Street, Heidelberg Heights, two completely different areas. Thank you. Councillor Alida has a question.
Yes, I do.
And Councillor Alicia also has a question. So Councillor Alicia is going to ask her question first, and then Councillor Alida is also going to ask her question. She'll do that after Councillor Alicia asks her question.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the respective officer, what legal requirement compels landlords to pass on the benefits to the renter that could be received if through a waste cost reduction should council amend the curbside waste rate to a charge?
Through you, Mayor, my understanding through the Retail Tenancies Act that there's no legal requirement for the landlords to pass on any savings to the renters as part of any rental agreement.
Thank you. And a second question through to the relevant officer. The ministerial guidelines, good practice guidelines on rates, was council asked to make a submission towards this before the minister published this document?
From my recollection, no, there was no request for council to make a submission to the guidelines.
Councillor Alida.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, I have a few questions, probably targeted at our Finance Director. My good colleague here mentions that the waste rate will be going down in the next budget. I'm interested to know against what baseline that will be going down, when indeed the curbside waste rate was charged at 16.8% in the 25-26 financial year, when the state cap rate on our general rates was 3%. Can you comment on that, please, Director?
Yes, through you, Mayor, the reduction in the waste rate, both curbside and public waste rate, is on the baseline of this financial year's budget. So what council is collecting to the 25-26 financial year. And yeah, I can confirm that those were the increases from the prior year to the both waste rates respectively.
Okay, yeah, I didn't quite fully appreciate the response there. I'm sure there was something in it, but we understand that it's going down, but I still don't understand by how much, given what we paid in this financial year. And I'm interested in the curbside waste rate. I'm just going to separate the public waste rate from the discussion at this point.
As Councillor Grotti mentioned, I'll just quickly go to the area of the budget that talks about the waste rates in question, so I make sure I get these correct. So the public waste rate for residential improved is reducing by 13.05% compared to the current financial year, and the curbside waste rate will reduce for residential improved by 0.41% compared to this financial year.
Okay, it'll reduce by 0.41% for the next financial year, whereas the rise this year was 16.8%. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor, that is correct.
Thank you. Thank you. That's important to understand. I also am interested in a comment made by the first speaker that 3/4 of residents would pay more for the public waste rate, or rather the curbside waste rate, with the imposition of a flat charge. Given that median property values across Banyule are around 1.1 million, is that indeed the case, that 3/4 of our residents would indeed pay more with the introduction of a flat charge?
Through you, Mayor, based on the calculations that officers have done, if council were to move to a fixed charge versus a waste rate, nearly 58% would pay more under that regime, with 38% or 39% paying less if we were to move from a rate to a fixed charge.
Okay, thank you very much. And for my final question, not that I really want to be pointing out differences between suburbs, but just to give us all an idea of some of the disparity between what households are paying. Can we know the difference, say, between the waste rate currently on a median house price in Watsonia versus Eaglemont?
Through you, Mayor, if I could, for example, if we were to move from a waste rate to a flat charge, Eaglemont on average will benefit, or the suburb of Eaglemont would benefit to the tune of an average of $252. And could you repeat the other suburb if you wouldn't mind?
Watsonia.
The suburb of Watsonia would have an increase of $44.90.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor, Councillor Rick, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This question may seem a little off topic for a moment, but bear with. Just through the appropriate officer, what's the official state government policy on waste to energy and glass collection? And just seeking confirmation that official state government policy is yes to both of those services. Through you, Mayor.
Yes, and through you, Mayor, that's correct at this stage.
Deputy Mayor, you had a follow-up question or not?
No, I'm good.
You're happy with that? Okay, great. Thank you. So does any other councillor have a question? Are you sure? Okay. Okay, we have an officer's report. Calling for a motion. No? Councillor Leader? Okay, Councillor Leader.
Introduces a fourth point, Mayor, and that is to request officers to investigate alternative curbside waste charging approaches and safeguards as part of the 2027 to 2030 Revenue and Rating Plan Review. It should be actually 2026. Just make it.
So sorry, you're saying that should be 20.
Shouldn't that be?
So you want it currently?
Oh no, we'll leave it at that.
Sorry.
Thank you. Yes, because it gives the officers the opportunity to do the investigations.
Right, okay. So we're at 2027 to 2030. That is remaining as it is. Okay, and you are moving that, is that correct?
I am.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? We have a seconder, Councillor Peter Castaldo. Okay. Councillor Leader, as the mover, would you like to speak to the item?
I would, thank you. And what I'd like to say is that while I do support adoption of the broader revenue and rating plan before us this evening, I do remain concerned that Council's current curbside waste charging methodology has not yet achieved the right balance between equity, proportionality, transparency, predictability and accountability. Judging by the ongoing debate in our community, and it's still very much alive and well, this is clearly an issue of significant community interest. Importantly, as has been mentioned earlier this evening, the state government's own good practice guidelines for service rates and charges identify the use of a fixed service charge for curbside waste collection as good practice, because there is a clear nexus between the amount charged and the actual service provided. The same guidelines caution against the use of property value-based service rate for curbside waste collection, because different amounts are levied despite substantially identical services being received. Now, I appreciate that there are strong views held around equity and protecting vulnerable households, and those considerations are important, will always be important. However, if Council wishes to pursue broader redistribution or capacity to pay objectives, I believe the general rating system, as was mentioned by one of our speakers, is likely the more transparent and appropriate mechanism for doing so, rather than through a curbside waste charge attached to substantially similar services. I also remain concerned that the curbside waste rate currently sits outside the Victorian Government rate cap framework. I mentioned the example earlier of the 16.8% increase in the 25-26 budget. We also had a 15.7% increase in the 23-24 budget. I believe this raises real concerns and questions around predictability and affordability for residents into the future. We've heard that the rate's going down for the next financial year, but what about the financial year after that? What about the ongoing financial years? For the record, this motion tries to raise an alternative, at least get us thinking about another way of charging for particularly curbside waste collection. And I'm just going to add that I don't think this issue is going to go away, regardless of the outcome of this motion tonight. I think we'll be hearing a lot more about it in the future. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Councillor Peter, as the seconder, would you like to speak to the item?
I also can't support the officer recommendation that was before us this evening. Apologies, my voice is lost at the moment. With a rate rather than a charge for curbside waste collection, as it hides the true waste costs for the community and doesn't incentivise waste reduction, but hides and pushes it onto properties that have a higher value. For the asset-rich, income-poor that makes a concerted effort to reduce waste, I cannot support this and agree with the guidance of the state government's good practice guidelines for service rates and charges. So I don't believe we can go forward with it as it was and be supporting a leader, but I will also foreshadow a second version of this following this if this is not passed.
Thank you, Councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the item?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to speak. It could get quite complicated now. If this isn't support, I'll be voting against this. And if it's not supported, I'll just be looking to move per the officer recommendation. Look, it's been a respectful debate and discussion, both amongst councillors and the community on this topic. And there are differences of opinion and legitimate differences of opinion. And so I don't want to sort of be negative or disparaging about that. I suppose a couple of things I just want to call out is we're often told there's state government policy on this. You should follow state government policy. Well, state government policy's says on waste to energy, do it. On glass, do it. Earlier on the night, we were talking about community safety. State government policy is what it is. We had a whole range of speakers saying state government policy isn't delivering. So on one hand, you have do state government policy when it suits you, and then on the other hand, when it's not working, no, don't do state government policy. Well, what this council does is that we look, unless it's legislation, law, regulation, We look at every issue on its merit, on its basis, and don't try and pull the state government policy argument. Another thing that I just want to point out is this income rich, asset poor. Well, what about the asset rich, income poor? Well, what about the income poor, asset poor? What about those in our community? They never get a mention. I asked the question earlier to one of the speakers, how many people of those surveyed was renters? Couldn't ask the question. What are we doing for renters? How does a change in these arrangements support renters? It doesn't. This is good policy for the overall ratepayers in our community, as the statistics have pointed out, 58% better off under the current arrangement, but it's also overwhelmingly better off for those that are renting. And renters make up 1/3 of our community, and I, for one, am happy to stand up for them. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? Councillor Elisha.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't be supporting the amended version, and I'm hoping that Councillor Garotti's comments actually meant that he was going to foreshadow the officer recommendation. That's how I've taken it. I think also that the good practice guidelines are just that. They're good practice if you don't know what you're doing. I think Banyule does know what it's doing. Saying one thing is important in that document, it's not best practice. Saying one thing is important over every other factor that suggests for us that it isn't the right way to go. I would suggest that factors that we've already brought up through questioning, that the landlord versus renter issue is dominant. Cost of living is very high on our agenda for this budget. We talk about it all the time, it's in the news. And one of those things suggests that the low income, low asset, rich people are suffering the most. And as if you are one of those people lucky enough to have a high value asset, then you have many more choices than those people that are in the rental income market. Those rental incomes have gone up significantly, and even for places like Ivanhoe, very significant. 32% of properties in Ivanhoe are rentals, and there's no guarantee that if we swap the methodology, that those people are going to see any benefit to it. So I think the officer recommendation really speaks specifically to Banyule, and I do consider all the input that we had very valuable. It's good for us to make those considerations, but I'm not on the side of the amended version. I will be supporting the original motion, the original recommendation. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? Okay, Councillor Liz.
Was it me? Thank you, Mayor. I don't want to repeat what Councillor Garotti and Councillor Curry said. I think they spoke very well on this. I might just add it's nice to hear that some speakers are happy with state government policy on this. It's not something we hear all the time. I also wanted to highlight separating this waste rate also benefits those people that don't have a curbside service from council. I have heard from a lot of those residents that are grateful for that as well. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mark.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, 2 minutes is not going to be enough on this topic, but I don't want to rush because I want to just make a couple of points from my perspective, from my community. First of all is that I remember many years ago, Mayor, that our rate was all wound up into one rate. Okay, it was CIV, depending on what value your property was, that's the amount you paid on your rate, and it covered everything. Now, state government imposed rate capping, which then meant that the escalating waste, oh my gosh, to dump rubbish, which is the landfill levy, went up and up and up. And it was a clear way that the state government was pushing those fees up to stop using landfill, to penalise the community for using landfill. Now, So then what we did is we pulled this out of the CIV and we made a separate charge for it. And now, my last rate notice, I look again and we've got it separated into curbside rate or curbside rubbish fee, public waste fee, we've got the emergency services fee, we've got all these fees that the community are looking at on their rate notice, and it's like it's become a bit of a slippery slide now. Like, what other charges and fees are going to be added that the state government are imposing on us to take in from the community to then give to them? So I put the classification of this rate in as a tax. It's actually a hidden tax. And there's no way whatsoever I will be asking my community to be taxed more or contributing more to a state government incentive or use of state government something. That's their job. They should be doing that. If they really wanted to incentivise us, they should be lowering land service levy and making it cheaper for residents. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Did any other councillor want to speak to the item? I'll say a couple of words and then your right of reply. Okay. As the Mayor, but also the Sherborne Ward Councillor, I sit on the fence. I sat on the fence last time we had this conversation. I sit on the fence. It's a Colorbond fence, it's capped, I don't get splinters. The thing with Sherborne Ward, it's actually, from a property point of view, it's actually the most diverse in Banyule. It has property values anywhere between $300,000 up to $7 or $8 million. So, frankly, as councillor, mayor, deputy mayor, I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't. A couple of points that arguments or points that have been made are perfectly true and accurate. One of them has been emailed to many of us, well, it's the same service for every household that's on its own title. So why should some pay more than others? And that's absolutely true. Why should they? And then there's the other argument that the way Banyule works is that this needs to be equitable across the board. And then we have a foreshadowed item and we have this. So now we have 3 possibilities to vote for. To reduce the amount of time sitting on the fence, I'm simply going to say that I'm probably not going to support this motion and look at the other 2. Thank you. You have a right of reply, Councillor Alida.
Thank you, Mayor. I must say it concerns me when a councillor suggests that the state government's good practice guidelines are for councils that don't know what they're doing. Does that indeed then mean that 77 councils in Victoria out of the 79 who have indeed considered the good practice guidelines by adopting either a fixed charge system for waste collection or a hybrid model don't know what they're doing? I suggest that's not the case. What's being asked of this motion is that we explore an alternative model. Nobody is saying we give up on our more vulnerable in our community, but exploration of an alternative model would include consideration of a capped waste charge mechanism, or further concession and hardship arrangements, hybrid charging models, the way the City of Darebin has done, and ultimately stronger alignment between charges and actual service provision. That's what we're asking for. So hearing what my fellow councillors have said in relation to how they're likely to vote, I just want you all to understand that I don't believe this issue is going away. Tonight's decision may adopt a 4-year revenue and rating plan. However, this issue will continue to return through the annual budget process and ongoing community discussion. So for those reasons, I suggest that we do attempt to explore other models given the level of interest. And I will be supporting this motion, and hopefully there'll be more than one or two of us. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. I now put that in motion. All those in favour? 1, 2. We have 2 in favour, and those against? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That motion is lost.
I seek to move.
Councillor Peter.
I seek to move an alternative motion then.
Mm-hmm.
Could we please see that? Yep. With the amendment to item part 1, I'll read the whole part. Adopt the Revenue and Rating Plan 26 to 30, Attachment 1, in accordance with S93, the Local Government Act 2020, with amendments to include a new differential rate being vacant commercial in activity centres. This new rate will be applicable to Council's 11 activity centres where a special rate or special rate and charge scheme applies, to be set at 4 times the general rate, and any other subsequent consequential amendments with part 2 and 3 as is.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Councillor Rick is seconding.
Mayor, may I ask a
Councillor
question,
Mark,
please?
Mm-hmm.
There's reference there to 11 activity centres. Can I just have clarity on how many activity centres we have in our municipality? Major activity centres?
Through you, Mayor. Major activity centres, we have 3. We have a range of activity centres ranging from major, neighbourhood and local. I couldn't give the exact figure of how many, but it'd be over 100 if you count all of those different ranges. The 11 centres, as I understand it, that are referenced in the proposed motion relate to those major and neighbourhood centres that are currently have a special rate or special rate and charge scheme in place.
Does any other councillor have a question? Councillor Alicia.
Thank you. Just for clarification on the amendment, the time period that needs to be considered before that rate of 4 times, is that going to be in? Would that default to being in line with the other rates that we've set, the differential rates in the matrix? Thanks.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, that's the intention of this amendment, to go in line with unoccupied premises, so the 12 months of being vacant.
Did you have another question, Councillor Alicia? I'll just call you Councillor Curry. No? Okay, does any other councillor have a question? Councillor Peter, right of reply.
I'd like to speak to the amendment in particular. This is an important amendment based on a number of properties that have been in effect derelict in our most important activity centres, in the centre of Eaglemont and in the top end of the Mel. For many years, these properties have remained weed infested and required council to take a number of initiatives to try and change the situation, and nothing has happened. For those reasons, it's very important that we identify ways to shift behaviour in an activity centre that's vital for the lifeblood of a successful economics in these areas to change the situation and activate those areas. And for those reasons, I've moved that amendment this evening after hundreds of conversations with residents complaining about why don't we do something about these vacant sites. Tonight we have, finally. So I'm very supportive of this. There's also some other elements to the plan. I won't speak to them. I'll leave something for others to speak to tonight, which are really important. And so moved, and I might have an opportunity and write a reply. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Look, I was a little reticent in, I suppose, accepting this amendment to the officer recommendation at this stage, but I've come around to it now, Councillor, so I'll seconding and I will be supporting this. If this resolution doesn't get up, I suppose I'm foreshadowing a third, which will be the original officer recommendation. But I think you and I know Councillor O'Kane have been very passionate about this issue in terms of effectively derelict land in some of our major activity centres. I suppose I was a little bit concerned about that arrangement of the 4 times the differential being applied across the board, particularly given all the commercial and industrial sites that we have and the potential for unintended consequences. But I suppose what you've done here is that you've narrowed it down specifically to the 11 centres where there is a special rate and charge scheme in place. And I think that's manageable. And I suppose we could see how that is implemented and what the impacts are, noting, as Councillor McKern has pointed out, this plan does come up to Council every year for a review and renewal. And if it isn't working, if we're finding that it is having some unintended consequences, I suppose at least you've limited the risk associated with that. So on that basis, I'm happy to support what's being put forward here. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the item? Councillor Mary.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a really quick comment to say that thank you to Councillor Castaldo for phrasing up this amendment and also working with officers to clarify it. So that is something that we see as manageable and targeted at the moment, because we have really, really vital community and economic and community infrastructure that really does need every lever pulled to get them thriving and viable. This is one of the issues that really has kind of been a barrier to that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Mark.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I can't support this evening on two key bases. Firstly is that, in the 11 activity centres, as it's stated up there, we actually have traders associations who form themselves into committees who vote themselves on and have president, secretary, etc., etc. And to have something go through at the last hour and adopt it tonight and set it in concrete, I think is a bit of a distrust with regards to how I would suggest they would expect us to operate. If anything is going to happen with regards to raiding in their areas, they should really know about it before anyone else. And this is probably going to be the first time they hear about it, and it's going to be, the council's just decided to put it in that night, and that's it. So now they're going to have to deal with the impacts. And what are those impacts? We don't know. We don't know what the impacts are. Unfortunately, this is a trigger that's been pulled on 2 properties specifically, which are vacant properties. And I don't understand how raising the rate to be 2 times to 4 times will get the owners of those properties, and in those areas they're probably multi-million-dollar properties, of vacant land, to then build a property or build a building on them to have a business in it. So they've got to now spend how many millions of dollars to put a building on there and then have a business in there to save what? How much on an unimproved piece of land? What would be the rate? Not very much. And that's the incentive to get them to move. It doesn't make sense to me. I think we needed, and as discussed before in briefings, we needed another mechanism to try and get these properties activated. I can't support this. I can't support this rash strike of the pen across all 11 activity centres with special rates, considering how hot special rates are. And when they come up, if we don't have the trust of the associations, going forward is going to be very difficult to renew them, write those terms again. Very concerned. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Would any other councillor? Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Mayor. So the council group has come together numerous times on this issue. It's been hotly discussed with 9 views from council and officer recommendations. It's been a hard-won battle just to get up what we did get up in the first place. I tend to agree with Councillor Di Pasquale that this isn't currently out for consultation with the committees of these groups. I'm concerned that not all consideration has been given to the amendment without the officers being able to sit and talk amongst themselves and then bring it back to council. I also think that scrutiny of councillors, that actually when we get an opportunity to understand the implications of the amendment, it sparks us to offer various views and various input about what's going on in our centres. So I agree with Councillor Di Pasquale. I don't think this has had enough scrutiny on it, so I'm very unlikely to support the amendment, but I'm still listening to the views posed by other councillors. Thank you.
Councillor Alida.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to preface by saying I do appreciate what Councillor Castaldo is trying to achieve here. He's been working on this. He's been frustrated by the situation with 2 particular vacant sites in 2 of our activity centres, Bell Street Mall and Eaglemont Village, that have been vacant and shouldn't be vacant because they do affect the overall centres that they're a part of. But using a blunt instrument like this that would affect 11 activity centres to try and affect change for 2 commercial sites is for me somewhat akin to using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. I'd like to think that there is another way to affect action regarding those 2 specific properties, and that other options be explored for those 2 specific properties. And with respect to that, I'm sorry, Councillor Castaldo, I probably won't be able to support this only because of the implications for 9 other activity centres where this doesn't have the same level of concern. I must admit, when this was discussed earlier amongst the councillor group, at the time we had a relatively high vacancy rate in one of our major activity centres, Ivanhoe, and I was really concerned, probably had a different opinion, but that has changed and most of our shops are now occupied. I'd like to think that we can find better ways to effect change for these 2 sites. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Liz.
Yeah, thank you. Just as councillors, we're trying to find the right balance with our revenue and rating plan, and we have people in the community coming to us with their views and trying to get that balance right, and we have to test things. Before talking about the waste rate and what all the other councils are doing, and I do want to reiterate that Banyul's house prices are extremely diverse. And maybe councils that have diversity like us in housing should follow suit. With this, it's something we haven't tested before. It probably isn't going to be a big difference to these rates. So I'm willing to give this a go. There's lots of things that we have to continually review, and we'll have that opportunity to do that after in a year's time. So happy to support this tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Did any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Matt.
Thank you, Mayor. And I didn't get a say on the bins, so I'll come back to the bins in a moment. But with this amendment, I'm nervous about it, starting to talk about some activity centres and not any. And the blunt instrument, resonates with me. I'm just not sure that this is going to do what it's intended to do. But we've got to do something, and it's got to send a message that we're watching and we're going to make a change. There's 3 properties in the heart of the city in Hordern Ward that are about 71 Banyule Road, down on Graham Road, and the White Elephant, 10 Buckingham, the old theatre, all about 8,000 square metres, doing nothing, contributing nothing to our city. And we've got to send a message that we want them activated. And I think at least this sets us down that path. All right, I'm going to just duck back to the bins. Sorry to do this, but just make a couple of comments I didn't before. So certainly no interest like self-interest. That's what's been demonstrated tonight. And unfortunately, life just isn't fair. I see waste as being an essential service. And I'd like to remind my fellow councillors that we're here to represent the best interests of our entire community, not just those that vote for us to be here. If we change this, there'll be 10,000 properties worse off in this. So this is an expensive service, someone has to pay. With regards to the commentary about being the only LGA that stands alone or apart from City of Melbourne, I'm proud of that. And you know what, there's a cost to live in Banyule. It's this great diversity we have when we talk about places like, to name a couple, Heidelberg West and then Eaglemont. And it is diverse. And show me another LGA that has something similar to that. So I don't mind standing alone there. So the wash-up of all of that is that I'll be supporting this amended motion that's on the board now for both those 2 areas for the reasons outlined. Thank you.
I think everyone's spoken. Okay. Yeah, just yes. And Councillor Peter, as the mover, I'm going to abstain from speaking. Thank you for the offer, though, Deputy Mayor. So, Councillor Peter, as the mover, would you like a right of reply?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mayor. I just got to start with, there's never been an item that I thought more about this than always back the horse named self-interest. It'll be the only one trying. So I've got to start with that. The other one I'm going to drop in there is you don't crack a nut with a wet sponge. We've been trying to do that for a number of years to make these empty properties full. They've done nothing. They don't care. We've tried initiatives, we spend lots of money, we poured up hoarding to hide the rubbish. They don't care. We need to go in with a hammer. That's what this is. This is the hardest and biggest hammer I know about, and that's why I'm going with it. And that's why I want councillors here to actually try and do something about a problem. So I'm fully supportive of this, and I think if there is an issue or there's added complexity, we can revert it in a year's time. And so I thank my fellow councillors for giving this an opportunity, because for 9 years I've been trying and got nowhere. So maybe tonight is the time where we make our centre manager that's complained about these vacant properties happy, because she's complained about this for many years, and the residents all around these properties that are sick of having weeds growing in the middle of their activity centre they want to be proud of. So hopefully we can move forward in the next 12 months. Thank you, and please support this, everyone.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Okay, I'm now putting that in motion. All those in favour of this particular motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And all those against? 2. 3. And 1 is abstained. The Mayor's abstaining. Is the Mayor abstaining on this one? Yep. So that is carried. Is everyone having fun yet? Okay, item 8.7. 1, Record of councillor meetings. There are no speakers on this item. Before we move to the motion, does anyone have a question of officers? There are no questions. Okay, we have an officer's report before us, set out in the papers, calling for a motion. Do I have a mover? This is an easy one. Councillor Liz. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Matt. Councillor Liz, would you like to speak to the item?
Yes, I would. There's no changes, I don't think. Simply, this is for people... Yes? Is that the wrong one?
No, we're at 8.7. We are voting on 8.7. We're at 8.7. Do you want to speak to the item as the mover?
No, thank you.
Okay. Seconder, would you like to speak to the item? Okay. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? Okay. I put that in motion. All those in favour? That is carried. Said, is anyone having fun yet? Item 8.6. Adoption of Rates Financial Hardship Policy 2026 to 2030. There are no speakers on this item. Before we move to the motion, does any councillor have a question of officers? I'm going to go with a no. There's an officer's report calling for a motion. Councillor Alida is the mover. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Liz. Councillor Alida, as the mover, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I think I will. I do support this policy because it recognises a simple reality. Some people in our community are indeed doing it genuinely tough, and council should respond with fairness, compassion and common sense. I think the emphasis in the officer report is on alignment with ministerial guidelines. Interesting, I should mention that. Ministerial guidelines have come up quite regularly in the debate this evening, and that it is actually very important. These guidelines exist for a reason. They remind councils that financial sustainability is not just about balancing the books. It's also about understanding the financial pressures on the communities we serve. I also think and right now, many households are under real pressure from rising living costs, mortgages, rent, insurance, energy bills, and increasing household charges. I also think it's important to recognise that some council-related charges can be subject to significant movement over time because of external market pressures, regulatory changes, and rising delivery costs. Capital improved value might enter that discussion. So while this policy is about responding to hardship once it occurs, it should also remind us to think carefully about affordability and predictability when decisions are made in the first place. And we know these pressures are real, and I want to give one example. Local food relief is a really interesting one. I do support Bansick Food Hub, which provides food relief particularly to the southern section of Banyul. And there I've seen it firsthand. Reported client demand for food relief support across Banyul has dramatically increased in recent years. Last year, Bansick supplied residents with more than 28,000 food relief hampers, and the demand is increasing. But what's really striking about this is that this increase isn't confined to traditionally disadvantaged areas. The data shows substantial growth in residents seeking food relief support from suburbs like Ivanhoe and East Ivanhoe, areas many people would traditionally regard as relatively affluent. But the reported increases are staggering, more than 300% over the last few years. I think that tells us something important. Hardship is becoming broader, less visible and more complex than many people assume. And it can happen to anyone. Illness, caring responsibilities, job loss or unexpected life events can quickly change circumstances. And I think this policy is strongest where it encourages early engagement, respectful treatment and practical support. For these reasons, I'll be supporting the policy.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Councillor Liz, would you like to speak as the seconder?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just briefly, What I like about this is it gives people a range of options so that they can meet their deadlines and manage this more easily. And I like that it's flexible, it's clear, it's equitable, and most importantly, confidential. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? Councillor Mary.
Mayor,
Councillor
thank
Mark.
you. Just quickly, I'd like to just mention, I think I'm very proud that we have this initiative. This is one that we as a council decided on many years ago. It has helped many people in the community. And to see it continue on, I think, is a testament to how we're sort of running things, and we have the capacity to do this with regards to the books and the finances, etc. And I think we would be one of the only councils that do this. So, yeah, when there are things that we do which stand out, I think, you know, we as councillors really can't pat ourselves on the back, nor do we get phone calls or emails congratulating us for what we're doing. We always get the complaints, don't we? But still, we just continue to go on and try and help as many people in the community as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mary.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of very quick comments. Firstly, I'd like to thank Councillor Grotti, I think, who introduced this policy and which has now become a permanent fixture and a permanent part, I think, of our councillor identity that we do this. The map, if you have a look at the map of where successful applications for support are mapped through, it's quite remarkable how evenly spread across the entire of Banyule these successful applications are coming from. I'd like to thank the officers, particularly in the finance team, who assess the applications coming in. From what I can tell, they're very difficult, challenging, and sometimes distressing situations that people are in, very, very difficult. And because of that, there is a particularly high percentage of applications that do ultimately get support through this program when they do apply. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? Councillor Alida as the mover. Would you like a reply? Okay, I'll put that in motion. All those in favour? That is carried. Item 10.1, Circular Economy, Waste Reduction and Recycling Act 2021 update. There are no speakers on this item. Councillors, before we move to the motion, does anyone have a question of officers? Okay, we have a report before us in the papers. I'm calling for a motion. Do I have a mover? Councillor Alida McKern. Do I have a seconder? That'll be me. I'll second it. Okay, Councillor Alida as the mover, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is a really good report, and this item does indeed raise an important question about how we improve recycling outcomes without unnecessarily increasing costs and complexity for households. Banyule has joined many other Victorian councils in raising concerns about the proposed mandatory fourth household glass bin. Importantly, Council's position appears strongly supported by the community. The Let's Be Clear on Glass survey, which was run collectively by a coalition of participating Victorian councils, including Banyule, as part of a statewide advocacy campaign against the mandatory fourth glass bin, found that of the 12,549 responses, 87% of respondents opposed adding a fourth bin to the existing curbside system, while 92% supported expanding the container deposit scheme instead. 774 responses, by the way, came from Banyule. I think those figures are significant. They tell us that residents are not rejecting recycling, they're asking for practical, efficient, user-friendly solutions. Many households already manage 3 separate waste systems. We've got general waste, recycling, the yellow lid bin, and the food and garden organics FOGO. For many residents, including older residents, apartment dwellers and households already dealing with rising living costs, a fourth curbside bin may simply feel unnecessary and burdensome. At the same time, the CDS is already changing recycling behaviour across the state. Expanding the CDS to include wine and spirit bottles, as occurs in other states, may provide a more efficient and community-supported pathway to improving glass recovery without duplicating systems or imposing substantial additional costs on councils and ratepayers. And I think the key point is that we all support improving recycling and reducing waste to landfill, but we also have a responsibility to advocate for approaches that are practical, cost-effective and supported by our community. If 92% of respondents to a survey support expanding the CDS, then perhaps the state government should focus first on improving the existing system before mandating another bin for our households. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. As the seconder, I don't need to add anything. The mover spoke exactly my mind. Does any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Matt.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, it is a good report, and I concur with Councillor Alita's comments. Cutting through all of this is about taking glass out of rubbish for waste to energy. And that's what the state government's trying to do. In our circumstances, we've got one of our major corporate tenants recycles and separates glass, and I just wonder if there's not a unique opportunity for Banyule. And the landfill that is closest to us has 100 years worth of reserve. And I know that doesn't apply over in the southeast. They're very much in a different situation, but we do. And we can't access it necessarily, but it is there. So this needs some real thought, uniquely for Banyule, and we need to stand up for what we think is right for our residents. $10 million, I'm led to believe, in the first 4 years for the purple bin. $10 million. And you'd think we're adding something, you're taking something away. No, it's $10 million is what I'm led to believe once we roll it out, and the service fee. I'm getting a bit of a concerned look there from one of the directors, but I'm pretty confident with that number. So roll it out, give or take a couple of million, roll it out over every LGA. Roll it out over every LGA, and it's somewhere between $700 and $900 million across the state. Fair dinkum. So I'm dead set against the purple bin. I haven't said it out loud yet, but I'm dead set against the fourth bin, and be doing whatever we can to find a better solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? You'd like to? Yeah, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just briefly, and look, we have in the gallery tonight a candidate for political office in the upcoming state elections. I won't acknowledge who they are because I didn't seek permission at the start of the meeting, but I'll just say thank you to that candidate for being here this evening and hearing what's happening tonight, and hopefully being very receptive, particularly on this item and particularly on this issue, because it is a big one. As Councillor Wood pointed out, 10 million. Let's run with that figure now, divided by 80,000 households. We might run with that, but it's about $100, $150 a year per resident household in our city. So that's big dollars for what many will see as an inconvenience and an inefficiency. So very happy to be supporting this recommendation tonight, and just shouting out, to those that are in state government or those that are putting themselves forward for state government. We're certainly looking forward to having conversations on these issues and hopefully working in partnership to get to the right outcome for our community. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Mayor. Just briefly, I'm supportive of all the comments that my fellow councillors have made. That big topic, that fourth glass bin, really I can't see any merit in it at this stage. We did get updated numbers, so the big Let's Be Clear on Glass campaign concluded today, or is concluding. It might be open till midnight. You can still fill in the survey. I would suggest that if you didn't get to fill in the survey, then go directly to those candidates for the upcoming election. Let them know how you feel about this particular topic. I think it should really change, and that number, which is currently 91% of respondents support expansion of the CDS, very, very high number, and 22,363 total responses to the issue, and 84% of respondents in Banyule oppose the glass bin. So I'm very happy to put this through tonight, and I think it was a really good officer report. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Alida, as the mover, would you like a right of reply? Nope. Okay, I'm going to put that in motion. All those in favour? That is carried. Item 11.1, Heidelberg Activity Centre, gazettal of amendments C172 and GC270 to the Banyule Planning Scheme. Councillor Curry, you have a general conflict of interest as you had declared at the start of the meeting. If you could please leave the chamber. Thank you. Okay, we have no speakers on this item. Before we move to the motion, are any questions of officers? Okay, we have a report before us in the papers. Do we have a mover for the motion? Deputy Mayor Councillor Rick. Is there a seconder? Councillor Matt. Councillor Rick as the mover, would you like to speak to the item? Councillor Matt as the seconder, would you like to speak? Would any other councillors like to speak to the item? Councillor Peter.
I recognise the intention of the state government's intervention on the Heidelberg Structure Plan review, and I understand the intention of the state government's housing choices and transport zone intentions, and I support it in principle. However, the years of work and the nuances that the local community and council understand, I simply cannot support the impact of this new zoning and believe we should be sticking with the original outcome of the consultation done in partnership with community that respected all these special and nuanced character areas around Heidelberg. That review was done over a number of years in great detail with the consultation of the community. The implication of the new housing choices zone intention of the state government was across over 50 activity centres done in a rushed review and only allowed people to speak but no consultation. Nothing was taken on board as far as I can tell. And for that reason, I will be abstaining from noting this item on the agenda because I believe on this occasion the state government has done a disservice to the fine work that we did and they got it wrong on this occasion.
Thank you, Councillor. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? Okay, I put that in motion. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That is carried. Could we please ask Councillor Alicia Curry back into the room? Oh, sorry, and Councillor Peter has abstained. Sorry, Councillor Peter has abstained, as you noted. Item 11.2, Proposed Public Art Policy 2026 to 2031. There are no speakers to this item. Before we move to the motion, does any councillor have a question of officers? Okay, we have a report before us set out in the papers. I'm calling for a motion. Do I have a mover? Councillor Alicia Curry. Do we have a seconder? I'll second it. Councillor Alicia Curry, would you like to speak to the item? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Very proud to be putting this up for tonight and moving the motion. As current chair of the Banyule Arts and Culture Committee, the committee has worked really hard on this particular document. Special acknowledgement goes out to Nick Cantor, who's gone over and above to develop a criteria matrix tool to assist officers with decision-making around public art investment. There's a lot going on with this document, and those that may be a little uninterested in art will probably see the benefits that public art provide in our activity centres, in our places of concrete. I think it's really important that we promote art. We also want to inspire our local artists. So the policy itself is directed, does have a lot of input for local artists, but it also supports other artists from other areas of Victoria and Australia to have art that's in a public place in Banyule, which hopefully will inspire our artists. It's a very inclusive opportunity for artists to participate. So the clarity on the multiple criteria relate to one another was very important. The committee had actually come back numerous times with a lot of alterations and put in a lot of input into this, both in the committee meetings and behind the scenes. We did remove a couple of things that didn't sit right, so the hierarchy approach to classification in public spaces, they thought was a disincentive to put art in some places that might not be the obvious choice, and support for the importance of equitable distribution of public art across the municipality. And art might be something that we can do that might be a little more easily accessible than putting in big pieces of infrastructure or park areas, or where we can't update an area. We can certainly put in some beautification options, and art gives us that opportunity. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor. As the seconder and the substitute of the committee, the Art and Culture Committee, I have every faith in this group. I have sat in on a few of the meetings, and this particular committee, as well as many other members of our Banyule community, are well invested in our art in whatever form that takes, and therefore contribution to the policy. So I thank them all for their contribution to the policy to continue to make Banyule an artistic place, as well as other things. Would any other councillor like to speak to this item? Councillor Liz.
I'll just speak briefly again. I agree with the feedback from residents in the report that they felt strongly that public art should respect the environment, the local area. It should inspire, spark curiosity and help people feel connected, in this case to Banyule and each other in the community. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Would anyone else like to speak to the item? Any other councillor? Okay. Councillor Alicia, as the mover, would you like to comment? Okay, I'm going to put that in motion. All those in favour? That is carried. Item 12.1, Banyule Art Collection and recommendations for new acquisitions 2025 to 2026. There are no speakers on this item. Councillors, before we move to the motion, are there any other questions of officers at all? Okay. We have a report set out in the agenda papers. Calling for a motion. Do I have a mover for this motion? Councillor Alicia Curry. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Elizabeth Neely. Councillor Alicia, would you like to speak to the item?
I would, thank you very much. I also wanted to give a shout out to Georgie Meyer, who's in the audience this evening, and to Hannes and to Steph, who put in a great deal towards our art community and our committee. We really appreciate you. We really appreciate the advice that you offer. Steph Neer, who's our art curator, has put forward these pieces. They've actually gone through a process, so the Promised Land by Jill Orr, the Same Time Different Place Eco Warrior by Jill Orr and the Spectrama by Anna Farago have gone through a process. They're not just chosen because they were liked. There's a working group set up that goes through the process of checking whether they, checking their acquisition against the policy, and these were tightly recommended according to the policy. All of these works are representative of Banyul in some way. So the Promised Land by Jill Orr and Same Time Different Place, these are works that were up in Ilch recently in an exhibition which mirrors the Impressionist artists that we've got on display down there as well. There's strong connections between those two places. The photographic works are actually taken in Banyul. You might recognise those places. It was put up on the wall behind it. And also Anna Farago, that piece, Spectrum, is a very beautiful textile piece that was designed and implemented or created down in the Ilch upstairs in the, I can't think what they're called, the Munga, I think I've got the name right. I suddenly realise I haven't got it written in front of me. Studios, where they can have studio spaces. I think if you have seen this work, you would realise what a great acquisition they are, particularly the important works by Jill Orr. She's a very nationally recognised artist. And these pieces, we are lucky to have them. We've also got the works a lot with the strong addition to the Banyul collection because it's so accessible. Both of these pieces are particularly appealing. And Anna Farago's work is beautiful textile, and she has been inspired from her beloved 72 Derwent coloured pencils. And I can tell you this piece is a very 3D piece of art that will be able to be put up in numerous spaces throughout Banyul. We do intend to show these works when the opportunity arises, and I think that's all from me on this. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Liz, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mayor. I am supportive of these three artworks, and acquiring art not only preserves history, culture and identity for future generations, it documents all the social change that happens over time. Public ownership of this art by council allows everyone in the community to learn and appreciate not only artistic achievements, but everyone can enjoy them regardless of background or income. It also encourages pride and as we know, social connection. Just to mention, I appreciate, our buildings, like the building we're in tonight, with beautiful architecture, heritage. It brings residents together and it connects people as being part of, Ivanhoe, Banyul, Heidelberg. And we're lucky that we are housing a national collection just downstairs in the library. So for me, investing annually in artwork is really important, and perhaps having some flexibility around this. If an important piece of artwork becomes available, it's something I'd like to discuss at the right time. I understand in times of inflationary pressure that art and culture, all types of arts are the first things to go. However, it's important to keep these aspirations and culture alive in our community. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? Councillor Curry, as the mover, would you like a right of reply? Okay, I'm putting that in motion. All those in favour? That is carried. Item 13.1, proposed inclusive employment. Item 13.1, proposed inclusive economy strategy 2026 to 2031 and action plan. There are no speakers on this item. Before we go to the motion, does any councillor have a question of officers? Okay, we've got a report before us, set out in the papers. I'm calling for a motion. Do I have a mover? Deputy Mayor, Councillor Rick Garotti. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mary O'Kane. Councillor Rick, would you like to speak to the item?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I'll just be moving with an amendment to point 1 that in adopting the proposed inclusive economy strategy and action plan 2026 to 2031, amend focus area 2 and 4 and the glossary to specifically include reference to people living with a disability. 2 as is, so moved. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mary, just to be clear, you are seconding that? Okay, Councillor Rick, would you like to speak to the item?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Look, great piece of work undertaken by our officers, and Georgie is here, Georgie Mayer. So thank you for staying on to the end of our council meeting. So this consolidates, I believe, 2 or 3 strategies, 3 across inclusive employment, social enterprise and economic development. So I think bringing them all together into one consolidated plan is obviously efficient. It obviously ensures that across those 3 dimensions we consider things holistically and from a system-wide perspective. So full compliment to our team for coming up with that and putting it forward and going through the process of consultation. Obviously very supportive. I just thought it was important to strengthen within the document the linkages back to people living with a disability. Obviously, in the bid to coordinate 3 strategies into one, language can some be softened and genericized. I think it's just important that one of the founding principles behind why Council did our original inclusive employment strategy and social enterprise strategy was a real focus on supporting those with disabilities, which is what we do as a council and which is certainly reflected in this plan, and the language now will obviously reflect that as well. It's very happy to move. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Mary, would you like to speak as the seconder?
Sorry, thank you, Mayor. I'm very pleased to support this strategy and acknowledge the significant work undertaken by officers to bring together 3 complex strategies into one coherent, inclusive economy strategy and action plan. This is not a simple consolidation task. It has required careful research, thoughtful analysis and extensive consultation to ensure that the distinct purpose of each strategy is not diluted, but strengthened through integration. I want to thank the officers for their disciplined and considered approach. So thank you, Georgie. At the core, this strategy sits at an important intersection where economic development, social inclusion and community wellbeing meet. Together, this right has a direct impact on life outcomes in Banyule. I am particularly interested in the focus on inclusive employment pathways and the role of social enterprise, not just as an economic driver, but as a mechanism for dignity, participation and opportunity for people who too often are marginalised. And I acknowledge the courage it takes for those individuals who keep showing up every day and applying for jobs. I also see strong potential here for support for local economic vitality in places not only like the Bell Street Mall, but all our smaller neighbourhood shopping strips, by fostering more dynamic, inclusive and resilient precincts. Importantly, I'll be looking forward not just to progress updates, but to reporting on outcomes, because this strategy sets ambitious goals: a more connected business community, inclusive employment, vibrant activity centres and leadership in social enterprise. If delivered well, these combined outcomes will help shape a distinctly Banyule culture, one that is practical, inclusive and genuinely vibrant. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? Councillor Liz.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to highlight some of the comments that the people in the program made on this, that those with lived experience felt there needed to be targeted mentoring and capacity building. And in terms of holistic support, when to go into this program. Childcare needs to be addressed, digital literacy, job readiness, collaboration with employers, social enterprises. These things were highlighted as a need, and it's good to see that this strategy encompasses those nuances of people that have had this lived experience. On a strategic level, Council, with the Northern Council Alliance, which includes 7 councils in the north, is advocating for that broader systemic change over the wider area, which is really positive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Would any other councillor like to speak? Deputy Mayor, as the mover, would you like a right of reply? Sorry. Yeah. You want to speak? Okay, go for it. Councillor Alicia.
Thank you, Mayor. Just very quickly, I just want to point out on this particular item, thanks to my fellow councillors, by the way, for all the comments, I agree. This one has a gender impact assessment. It was very important to note that feedback highlighted a mismatch between participation and opportunity. Women make up most of the inclusive employment applicants, yet council partnerships are largely with male-led social enterprise. And so the GIA has recommended stronger monitoring of gender-specific outcomes. So I know my fellow councillors have noted that measurement and the measurement of success is really important. And so recognising some of these trends, if we don't recognise them, we don't see them, we can't fix them. So it's very important. It shows you what a benefit of that GIA statement in these in our agenda is. And I look forward to supporting that and seeing results out of this program. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor. Did any other councillor wish to speak? Okay. Deputy Mayor, would you like a right of reply? Okay. Putting that in motion, all those in favour? That is carried. Item number 15, general business. We have several items of general business this evening. Perhaps we could start with Councillor Mary O'Kane.
Thank you, Mayor. I will speak about the volunteer awards that we had on last Wednesday night, and it was wonderful to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, many of us here in the gallery today who attended, and it was a fabulous evening. I thought the general, if I can use the word vibe, was particularly welcoming and particularly friendly, and it was very, very easy to move through all of the different groups and tables, and major congratulations to all those that were nominated. And the wonderful spread of people that got highly commended and won the awards also. It was a great evening.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Now we have Councillor Elizabeth Neely. You have an item? I'm just moving around the room.
Oh, that's okay. Just a quick one. The Mayor, Councillor Champion and I attended a St Helena Secondary College performance of The Taming of the Shrew, which is a comedy by William Shakespeare. I've never seen the Mayor laugh so much, so it was a great night. But great again, supportive I am of the arts, and so is the Mayor. It's a good night. Thank you.
Yes, it was a fun night. Councillor Alida McKern.
Thank you, Mayor. On Friday, I had the honour of being on a speaking panel at the Victorian Food Forum, and I'd like to thank council staff, Georgie and Ellen, for their support. They do an absolutely thorough job of implementing the actions of the urban food strategy, and it was a delight to actually be invited to participate in the forum. And I'd also like to thank other representatives who attended for Banyule Council, Barberton Beak Aboriginal Gathering Centre representative Kristen, Bansick Food Hub staff Kate, and we also had 2 staff members from one of our urban farms, Farm Raiser. The key objectives of the event included contributing to the shaping of the new Australia National Food Security Strategy. So it's great to see that Banyule is considered one of the leading councils in this space to make a contribution. Planning reform to stop the further expansion of the fast food industry. Unpacking the role of government and practical actions required across all levels to create more resilient food systems, and also First Nations leadership. This was really interesting and a bit new for me, exploring Aboriginal food sovereignty and the importance of traditional knowledge in building a sustainable agri-food future. For example, we learnt about native grass seed and the protein-rich nature of this as a food source, but making it commercially viable, being able to grow it in quantity is the subject of much research. We have so much to learn about the native foods of this culture. So that was terrific. And upcoming, we've got the Chelsworth Community meeting this Thursday, the 28th of May. Looks like we're going to have a very good turnout. The focus will be on community safety, neighbourhood amenity, graffiti and property damage, and we do have a senior sergeant from Heidelberg Police Station coming to address the group. If you're interested to attend, it'll be starting at 6:15 for light refreshments and some networking for a 6:30 community meeting start at the Ivanhoe Library. You do need to register. If you could send me your interest to attend and any topic or query you'd like addressed, just to alita.mckern@banyule.vic.gov.au. And just to top it off, we've got another presentation at the Catholic Church on Friday, the 29th of May at 6:30, where I'll be discussing environmental initiatives happening in Banyule for this coming year. So lots happening and exciting time for the council.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Did any of the councillor have a general business item? No, okay, just myself. Okay, so I've got a couple. I attended the Olympic Neighbourhood House annual general meeting last week, and despite the challenging economic times and high demand for this service within the local community, as well as significantly damaged building, the board shared that the programs can continue through 2026. This meeting was one of the most professional, with all the members either hands-on at the site or supporting in the background, showing dedication to the growth of residents' education and connection, and therefore their health and well-being. Banyule Council values its partnership, albeit limited, and appreciates the dedication of the staff to their participants' needs. I attended the Banyule Nillumbik Local Learning Network annual general meeting as well last week. This is another professional meeting which highlighted two significant events. It was the 25th anniversary of its inception, connecting youth job seekers in Banyule and Nillumbik with local employers from all disciplines, as well as the rollout of the Youth Services Hub, which has been supported by Banyule City Council to the tune of around $7,000. This Youth Services Hub is an online resource for both youth job seekers and employers to connect, leading to targeted applications, interviews and suitable employment opportunities, as well as historical retention of information for job seeking purposes. So if you would like to understand more about the Youth Services Hub, please contact the Banyule Nillumbik Local Learning Network directly, or you're welcome to contact Council to learn more. Thank you. Okay, so we're up to public question time. We've got 3 questions. If any members of the public are in the gallery who have a public question, they're welcome to approach the lectern and ask their public question when the name is read out. For those who are not present, the question will not be read out and will be included in the minutes of the meeting. The minutes will be available on our website later this week. Please note that councillors have the background information. When you're asking your question, in the interests of time, kindly proceed directly to the question itself. So our first public question is from David Peach of Eltham. Hello, David. Thank you for joining us this evening. What is your question?
Privilege, thank you. Has the Level Crossing Removal Authority given Council any indication of a timeline when Ivanhoe Level Crossing and Station Precinct might be upgraded, and whether it would be an over or an under type development?
Thank you for your question, David, and through you, Mayor. Council has not yet been advised by the state government or any authority that a level crossing removing project will be undertaken at Ivanhoe Station. Council is seeking state government action to upgrade Ivanhoe Station to comply with the Disability Discrimination Act and provide an access compliant alternative to the existing non-access compliant pedestrian overpass. This includes adding the station to the level crossing removal projects program to remove the level crossing at Marshall Street, and as part of this ensure accessibility improvements, including providing compliant access between the station platforms and the station car park. This project is included in Council's advocacy project priorities, which is available on our website.
Thank you. And we have a question from David Mulholland of Ivanhoe. Thanks, David. Could we have your question, please?
Thanks, Mayor. Why is Banyule funding vehicles for the local police, which is a state responsibility? How much is this costing ratepayers annually, and when was this funding approved by Council? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mayor. As foreshadowed earlier this evening, Banyule regularly collaborates with key partners, including Victoria Police, on matters of community safety. Following a recent neighbourhood policing forum and regular discussions between officers, a suggestion was put forward to facilitate greater policing presence in locations difficult to access by motor vehicle, specifically in parts of Heidelberg West. The bikes were procured through a local business, and Council contributed $9,300 towards the initiative. The allocation of funding was made under officer delegation in line with Council's operating budget.
Thank you. And our third question is from Brendan Murphy. Here we go. Here he is. Hey, Brendan. No? Okay. Mark is reading it out. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Director.
Considering the City of Whittlesea has no assertive homeless outreach program, and Banyule City Council will not provide assertive homeless outreach to Bundoora Square, Plenty Road would be the responsibility of Vic Roads. Considering an individual's dire situation, could Vic Roads please be asked to provide assertive homeless outreach for this person?
Thank you for the question. Assertive Outreach in Victoria is a Department of Families, Fairness and Housing, otherwise known as DFFH, Homes Victoria funded service system. It's not Vic Roads. It's not a Vic Roads function. These services are delivered by specialist homelessness organisations and sometimes in partnership with local councils like Banyule. The purpose is to actively locate and engage people sleeping rough, build trust, and connect them to housing, healthcare and supports. As someone recognised in the community who advocates tirelessly for homelessness supports, it may be advisable for you to encourage the individual to seek shelter in a location where supports can be offered.
Okay. Thank you all for your questions and the answers. There is no confidential meeting this evening. I'm closing the meeting at 10:07 p.m. Thank you all for your attendance and for your participation, whether you were in the chamber or in live stream land. Our next ordinary meeting of Council will be held on Monday the 22nd of June 2026. Enjoy the rest of your evening.